Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'm going to go through the roll call with regards to who's here, because we do have 4 members on Zoom tonight. When I call your name, just say here. Councillor Bagu.
Here.
Councillor Beauregard.
Here.
Councillor Bodner.
Here.
Councillor Bruno.
Here.
Councillor Danch.
Here.
Councillor Desmarais.
Here.
Councillor Clailiff.
Here.
And Councillor Wells.
Here.
Thank you. I'll go into my mayor's report at this time. Welcome to our virtual council meeting. We have Councillors Bagu, Bruno, Clailiff, and Wells in the council chambers. And also joining us our Gary Long, our manager of strategic projects, Clerk Amber Lapointe, and Deputy Clerk Charlotte Madden, and our favorite guy from WeeStreem, who's here every Monday meeting. Our other 4 city councilors and various city directors are each attending from home. Niagara does remain in stage 3 of the COVID-19 recovery process. There's been staggering numbers of new cases across the province over the last several days, and we've seen the province roll back several regions to a modified stage 2. We here in Niagara need to continue to work hard so that everyone across Niagara does not get rolled back as well into a modified stage 2. Again, we emphasize the need for social distancing, hand washing, face coverings where social distancing can't be maintained, or where required by the region's face covering bylaw. We ask that you continue to support our local businesses, specifically our restaurants, as patio season pretty much has come to an end if you look at the weather this week. These businesses still need our support, as well as all our retail and other businesses here in the municipality. This past weekend, I was able to get together with the Port Colborne Golden Puck. Our annual team got together for the Lions Club food drive, which was changed from a November date to an October date. And we had 2 routes that we looked after this year. And although we weren't door knocking, we still were able to, on our 2 routes, garner quite a bit of goods for Port Cares. So it was great. So on behalf of council, we thank all the volunteers. We thank the Lions Club for doing this for lots of years. I can't remember, I think there was 1 year out of the last 20 or so years that I've done this that I've missed. It's a fantastic day and it's a lot of fun. Again, we had to adapt this year. I think it all went well. And again, we appreciate what the community has given to such a worthy cause, and making sure that the shelves at the food bank are loaded with food. And over the last 6 months, we've had several staff members decide to retire. Normally, we would have them out here to a council meeting to recognize their years of service, but these are not normal times. I would like to publicly recognize the following for their combined 227 years of service to the city of Port Colborne, and congratulate them as they enter the next stage of their lives. Heather Mahan, 29 years. Joanne Benson, 27 years. Terry Zerlo, 17 years. Sylvie Baudouin, 31 years. Pete Levere, 34 years. Mark Stead, 30 years. Jim Brown, 34 years. And Brent Eden, 25 years. Thank you to all those staff members, and again, please enjoy your retirement. With the winter season approaching, our Parks Department has installed a portable washroom near the Harbour Master Building on West Street at Charlotte Street for the use of the public. This washroom will remain available to the public until further notice, as our facilities at H.H. Knoll, Lakeview Park, and Lockgate Park are closed for the season. Our new garbage collection schedule has started, and residents are reminded they can put out their 2 bags this week for garbage alongside their green, blue, and gray bins. It was troubling today that I learned that our municipal roadside garbage containers, meant for small amounts of garbage when walking past, are being filled with household garbage. We need everyone to do their part to manage their own garbage by using your green bin for food and pet waste and putting this to the curb each week. If your household requires a second bin, they are available for $17 right here at City Hall. Give our customer service reps on the first floor a call, and they can arrange a time for you to pick one up. I know this change is new to everyone, but let's all do our part to keep our city neat and tidy. The Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum is currently offering socially distanced guided tours of this year's exhibits. And as a longtime supporter of the museum, I would like to thank Lower Lakes Towing Limited, who have sponsored the cost of all guided tours for this year. We ask that you call the museum at 905-834-7604 to book your private tour. And I know they're chomping at the bit to get going on that. So if any counselors know of anybody who wants, please spread the word. Halloween is coming this weekend, and Public Health has released some guidelines if you are planning to take your children trick-or-treating. We ask that you stay home if you're feeling ill or if you have mild symptoms. Only go out with members of your direct household. Only trick-or-treat outside. Both trick-or-treaters and people handing out candy should wear a face covering. A costume mask is not a suitable or a substitute for a face covering and should not be worn over a face covering, as it may make it difficult to breathe. Consider building your face covering into your or your child's costume. Do not congregate or linger at doorsteps. Line up 2 meters apart, 6 feet for you old-timers. Avoid high-touch surfaces and objects. Whether collecting or handing out treats, wash your hands often and thoroughly or use hand sanitizer. Do not leave treats in a bucket or bowl for children to grab. Consider using tongs or other similar tools to hand out treats. Parents will need to make a personal decision about participating this year. If you do participate, please do it safely. The Royal Canadian Legion will have poppies available for purchase starting this Friday. Legion volunteers will not be canvassing outside stores this year, but rather poppy boxes will be placed in 65 locations, such as stores and schools from Wainfleet to Gasline. We ask that you support the Legion's efforts. The Remembrance Day ceremony will also be different this year. The public ceremony at the Cenotaph at H.H. Knoll Lakeview Park has been replaced by a private ceremony for Legion members only to be held inside the branch. The Legion is hoping to be available to live stream the event, and details about this will be available on social media closer to November the 11th. The Legion has asked members of the public to please observe 2 minutes of silence at 11 a.m. on November 11th in lieu of attending the ceremony. And in closing, we ask for your patience while we all work together and remain vigilant in fighting the COVID virus. Our number one priority is the health and safety of our staff and our citizens. Again, please stay safe. Thank you. Councillors, I'll go online. Any questions on the mayor's report? Councillors in the chambers? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if it's to do with your report, but it was a thank you to you for an item that I was recently made aware of that's installed. And I know you were an integral part of that, including the CAO and others on council that certainly are impacted by it, the councillors in Ward 1. I know that the long standing problem of ATs and off-road vehicles using the rail spur from Steel Street out to Cement Plant Road has caused undue grief over the last 10 plus years. And recently, if people haven't seen it, there is a fence, and I believe it is just, I'm sure, east of Linwood, crossing from the backyards on Clarence Street over to the fence behind Portal Village with a train gate on it, a walk-through gate that's angled so ATVs and motorbikes can't get through, as well as a gate for any servicing. So that is now closed off. Don't know if I'm sure there'll be the cat and mouse game of tunneling, working around ramps, God knows what, but I think it's a long overdue step. And I wanted to thank you and the CAO and Geo Rail for finally pushing that through, coming up with the cost sharing. And I didn't know if you had anything to add, but it's certainly good news for those in Portal Village and those on Clarence Street. I'm sure there will be a few hiccups along the way, which might cause some people who haven't had a problem to have one, but I think we can start picking away at that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And again, you're correct. We were able to partner with Geo Rail and specifically their general manager, Neil Johnson, who worked with the CAO and myself to get that installed, and it has been an issue. It was an issue when I served on council, when you served on council. So we think, you know, it's not the end of it all, but it is, as a famous person once said, the beginning of the end. So, you know, we are making our wishes known within the community that, you know, there's a place and time for ATVs and off-road motorcycles, but that particular area is not one of them. So again, we thank the partnership here, and that's what we do strive for, is try to partner on these things to make the city and our residents a lot safer. So thank you, Councillor. Anything further? Councillor.
I'd like to add my thanks to that as well, Mr. Mayor. I've already had some people very positive about it. It was long overdue. You know, Mark and I have been working on it. Councillor Begg and I have been working on this as well. We've only been here for 2 years and we're frustrated already. But it's another step in the right direction, along with, I know there's increased police coverage on it as well now. I know that they're looking at the bikes going through there, everything. And I think altogether, far less complaints than we were receiving a while ago, and finally some compliments. So it's nice to hear that, and you deserve those as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was remiss in saying, with the new owners of the rail line, or the new operators, I should say, we own the rail line, but Geo, as the new operator, wants to be a very good corporate citizen within Port Colborne and be involved within our community. So this was a perfect start for them. So again, thank you. So, okay, seeing no other questions, we have Regional Councillor Barb Butters up next. Councillor Butters, welcome.
Hi everyone, good to be here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to just give you kind of the highlights, or the Coles Notes version of the regional meeting. First off, the credit rating for the Niagara region is standing at a AA place, which is a good thing. The mask bylaw was amended to include common areas in apartment buildings and condos, so hallways, stairwells, laundry areas, etc. And there'll be some extra emphasis on the need to really be non-judgmental and be kind to those who cannot wear a mask and qualify for an exemption. We did have a presentation from a young woman who represented herself quite well, and she has experienced various forms of some pretty severe harassment because she falls into an exemption category. So people can be mindful of that. That's the message: is be safe out there, but also be kind to others. So the mayor covered really well the Halloween piece and November 11th. So I'll just add, a reminder to stay safe out there. Want to also add my congratulations to our retirees in the city of Port Colborne. Job well done, and I hope your retirement is healthy and happy and a real good one. And you'll probably find that you're busier now coming into retirement than you ever did when you're in your working life. So enjoy all of that, and hopefully those out there will be able to celebrate November 11th and recognize, those that we really need to recognize in terms of those that we've lost in past wars and those that serve our country. It'll be virtual ceremonies, but that should make it no less special. Maybe it should make it more special. Anyway, this year is a different year, that's for sure. And if there's any questions, be happy to take them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions? I'll go online first. The Regional Councillor. Seeing none, I'll start to my right. Councillor Wells, Councillor Bruno, Councillor Baggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Councillor Butters, the mask bylaw, does that also cover the community living buildings that are subsidized by the region?
I believe it covers all buildings.
Okay. Thank you, because I know we have some difficulty with smoking in some apartments, and some community living buildings you can smoke and some you can't smoke. So I just didn't know if this mask thing was the same thing. So thank you, Councillor Butters.
Oh, I don't think you mean community living. That's a separate organization.
I mean,
You're
subsidized.
talking about Niagara Regional Housing?
Yeah, Niagara
Niagara
Regional
Regional
Housing.
Housing.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and actually under Niagara Regional Housing, we've helped supply a lot of masks to residents there who perhaps would have been unable to get them. So there's been a great effort in terms of that safety piece and a healthy piece for folks that live in subsidized housing.
Okay, great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayliff. Okay. Councillor Butters, it's been a pleasure again. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're
As
getting
always.
comfortable in that chair, Councillor. Every Zoom meeting we have, you're locked right in that little space at your house. That's perfect.
I am.
Good stuff. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Enjoy Halloween.
Yeah, you too.
Madam Clerk, introduction of addendum items.
There are none this evening.
Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda, moved by Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Bagu. Any questions with regards to the agenda? Looking online, looking in the room, seeing none. All those in, just raise your hand to vote yes for the agenda. Thank you. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Disclosures of interest. I have one this evening. Councillor Beauregard has declared a conflict of interest on item number 6, the memorandum from Councillor Wells regarding designating the vulnerable aquifer Schedule B of official plan as a source water for rural residents of Port Colborne. So that's duly noted. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a conflict on number 2 as one of the couples in this issue, and my wife and I share the same granddaughter, so I think that's a little bit too much of a conflict, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, no problem, duly noted. You have that, Madam Clerk? Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. The regular meeting of Council 27-20 held on October 13th, 2020. I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bodnar moving that. Any question to those minutes? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. So items requiring separate discussion this evening, we have items 2, 3, 4, and 6. Oh, sorry, and 1. I apologize. You had so much written between the two that I missed it. So, yes, so 1, 2, 3, and 6. 4 and 6. Any further items? Councilors online, anything further? Councilors in the chamber, anything further? I have Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Beauregard. For the remainder of the items, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We have one delegation and one presentation this evening. First is our delegation. Carol Nagy, Executive Director, Hospice Niagara, regarding community funding grant request for expansion of hospice, residential, and community services across the region. And that is found on page 8. Councillors? Carol, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you. Nice to see everybody, members of council, and thank you to staff for helping us kind of put this presentation together. I'm wondering if I can share my screen with everybody.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Is that available for everyone to see?
Yes, it is.
So I'm Carol Nagy, the Hospice Niagara Executive Director, and thank you for your time tonight. We're at a critical point right now in end-of-life care in Niagara. So I wanted to bring this to your attention, and it comes with an ask, and I'll review that and answer any questions about that. Certainly not the best time for an ask, I get that because of COVID, but nevertheless, we still have to plan for end-of-life care. So right now, one of the critical factors in our community is the high incidence of hallway medicine. And in fact, prior to COVID, we were the fourth largest average hallway medicine conditions in Ontario. And I can't tell you the number of stories that I've heard from family members that have been trying to help their loved ones who are in the hall, dying in the hall, who are or also dying alone in hospitals. And that's not what we would wish for anybody. We also have limited hospital services, and I'll go over that in a minute. And the need of palliative care, particularly in our South communities, is rather urgent because of a number of changes to hospitals that I'm sure you're aware of. We also have a higher demographic of aging population mixed with those people that have chronic long-term issues in the South, making us have hard-to-serve regions that don't have enough services for people. And that's a particular aspect of South Niagara that we need to address. So just going over some of the data, I also want to point out that we have the 4th largest emergency room department in Ontario. 20% of those people that are in ALC or alternative level of care beds really don't need to be there in our hospital system. They need to be placed either in long-term care or in hospice if they're at end of life. And in 1997, the ministry, this is the last time they pulled this data, Niagara had the 2nd highest costs in acute palliative care at $108 million. And that's significant. That really tells us that we have to make a change to how we're planning around end of life. So our hospital situation is not great. Port Colborne, the questions about what's going to happen to the Port Colborne Hospital are up in the air. Right now, there's no end-of-life beds in St. Catharines. So in fact, what happens if people are dying in St. Catharines is if they're able to, they are moved out to Port Colborne into the end-of-life beds in this hospital. They also then are also moved to Niagara Falls. Not many, but some may move to Fort Erie, and some would go to Welland, but not many people are kept in St. Catharines. This is really putting a burden on the beds down here. And again, as we look at our hospitals closing in South Niagara, it raises some questions about what we're going to do for end-of-life care. In Fort Erie, when the new hospital opens, there are roughly 6 end-of-life beds that are managed right now with a physician. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Dr. Scher. He provides in-home care, but also care around these 6 beds. Those will not be moving to the new hospital. So those will be lost to this region. As we started to plan for this about 2.5 years ago, and what's happening as we were projecting out, our board of directors was concerned that our 10 beds that exist right now in St. Catharines on Ontario Street were not able to manage the demand that we were seeing. We have well over 700 referrals in the year, and we were able to accept anywhere between 250, at the top end, 300 people. And the more that we tried to change and become more efficient in our referrals, the more the volume of referrals grew. So we realized we're just not going to be able to get on top of this with 10 beds, and that we needed to do an expansion. When we started to discuss this, we also looked at all of the end-of-life beds in the hospital system. And as I just said, that really heightened our need. And also Hotel du Shaver has 5 end-of-life beds that are designated by the province. In their expansion plans, they've gone to the province and asked for an expansion of end-of-life beds, and they were refused. So the province has very clearly said that Hotel du Shaver will do what they do best, and that's rehabilitation services. By their estimates, we will be 17 beds short in the next 5 years for end-of-life care. And that's without considering the other hospitals closing. So we really are in a crisis situation. Right now at Hospice Niagara, over the last 2 years, we have found that 60% of the people that are in the beds in St. Catharines are actually from South Niagara. So this is all skewed and it's all wrong. And, we want to be able to put the services in the communities that need them and help those communities. So that's why I'm coming to you and explaining what's going on. From an economic perspective, certainly you can see by this information that it's more economical to have people die in hospice care. It's half the price of hospital, and it's where people want to die. And in fact, Canadian studies show 80% of those people want to die at home. I just show there and highlight some of our positive service data. When we care for somebody within a hospice palliative care philosophy, they're involved in their care, they're making decisions about their care, and it's about quality of life and making sure that we are providing them with dignity and respect along with their family members until the very end. So when we started to embark on how are we going to expand, it was very clear from the province, who provides our funding, that there was not going to be any appetite for a standalone hospice. So we looked across the region, we explored every community looking for integration opportunities, and we found 2. And one is in Fort Erie with Gilmore Lodge, which is at the cusp of an expansion project. And the other one is in Welland, North Welland, with Foyer Richelieu. So we started to build a model, envisioning that if the hospice is a component of this long-term care build only, not in standards, but just in the building itself, a one-wall joining, that this would really decrease the capital cost for hospice. And in fact, building a 10-bed hospice alongside this model is really half of the cost of what a regular hospice would be. So that was our intent as we set out. We worked with the province and Ministry of Health and Ministry of Long-Term Care to approve this. And in fact, the Ministry of Health has improved the operational funding once the beds open, which is great news. They also look at this as a test of change for other parts of this region and other communities in Ontario. Because this integration model provides that economies of scale, not only in the build, but also integration opportunities for infrastructure. So for example, looking at building one server system throughout the entire building so that hospice wouldn't have its own. Looking at shared generator systems. Looking at, of course, shared maintenance of the building and of the parking and all of the outdoor elements. So all of those things that we're not funded for as a hospice, but that add to the cost of operations, became a sustainable model that the province was very aware of and excited about. So we're standing right now with operational approval for the two buildings. We certainly know that every community in Niagara would like to have their own hospice. I've been out speaking to everybody, and I know that's the case. But here's what happens when we start to build in this way. One, I don't think it brings us closer to it brings us a little bit closer to what the Auditor General was hoping to have, which is between 7 beds per 100,000 people in the Niagara region. It doesn't get us all the way there. It also puts us in a place where we've demonstrated to the ministry that we can do this, and we can do it within an integration framework, and we can do it in a way that meets all of their priorities and criteria as we go forward. This build will also bring in 50 to 60 healthcare professionals into the region. And they'll be looking to locate all over the region. And I know that they also will increase the care in hospitals, in long-term care homes, and in the community, in homes as well, in people's homes. Because our staff, not all of them work full-time for us. A lot of them work part-time or casual. And I know that we don't retain all of our staff, and they move within the healthcare system. So from that way, we're hoping to increase the overall care for everybody throughout this South Corridor. And I live in Wainfleet, and I get it. I'm the furthest out from these new builds. But certainly, Port Colborne, you've been served well by Dr. Scher, both in homes and in the hospital. And we expect that this will continue. We also are looking at, from the mayor's suggestion, I had a really good conversation with the president of Niagara Health, Lynn Guerrio. And, looking at that Port Colborne Hospital and what are some of the alternatives in the future. And we've got some time to plan, but there certainly is a commitment on both of our parts to continue to look at either a spread of this model or so what are some other palliative care needs in our region that might be served well in the city of Port Colborne. So I'm asking all municipalities to help out this time. On the first build in Hospice Niagara up in Ontario Street, that was done purely on donations. This time the economics are a little bit different. And I know that COVID is straining every municipal budget, but certainly there is the understanding that this is a need in our areas. We're at a critical point now. There's flexibility in how it's funded. I'm asking every community to look at a $4.83 per capita payment based on your 2016 census, which for Port Colborne is about $90,000. And that can be, over 5 years. It's not something that I know is easy to come up with for small communities. But certainly I'm asking if Port Colborne would see the value in these regional hospice beds and the spread of this kind of care throughout all of Niagara. So thank you very much for your time.
Great, Carol, thank you. And counselors, those online, does anybody have a question to Ms. Nagy? Seeing none, anyone in here have a question? Councillor Clayliff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Carol. Hi, Carol. Nice to meet you and hear you. I'm a great believer in hospice and everything it stands for. Can't tell you how happy I'm to hear you say that you're looking at Port Colborne Hospital. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have a palliative care unit at Port Colborne Hospital or other palliative care services, like you said. I'm happy to hear those conversations are taking place. I'd be happy to be involved in them, anything that I can do on that front. Started my career at Port Colborne Hospital, so I have great affinity for it. So anyway, thank you, and hopefully we can pull this together.
I hope so. Thank you for your support and your offer going forward.
Great, thank you, Councillor. And I just want to thank Carol for taking me on a tour last fall, and that's really where the whole ball got rolling with regards to the Port Colborne hospital site. And we all know that it's not a full-fledged hospital like it was when specifically the four of us grew up in Port Colborne, and most of those online. It isn't that anymore. It has what we used to call the emergency department, which is now just a critical care department or urgent care department. So there are areas in the hospital that we hope, and again, through partnerships between the NHS and Hospice Niagara and with the City of Port Colborne, that at some point maybe that site would be a next expansion across Niagara for hospice to operate. One thing I wanted to ask you though, Carol, is can you just touch on the in-home service that you also provide? I think that's very important, not only from your site in St. Catharines, then your future sites in Welland and Fort Erie and beyond, but how Hospice Niagara does work within homes across Niagara.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Mayor, for that question. So most people associate hospice services with only the building, but you're right. We are in so many homes. In fact, we're over now about, we're about 4,000 homes a year, where our first primary source is like a hospice at home, where we work with community physicians. Dr. Schur is one that serves Port Colborne, as well as Dr. Debbie Dooler serves Port Colborne. Nurse practitioners from the LHIN, our staff, and our volunteers, where we really wrap services around those people and caregivers. So we help people to stay at home as long as possible by addressing pain and symptom and other palliative care issues or end-of-life issues. And some of that is supportive counseling. So for example, people coming to terms with the fact that they are dying, and maybe there's some legacy work that we can do, but certainly there's a lot of caregiver support. And with that caregiver support, we help people to die at home if that's their wish, or to stay at home as long as possible. And what we found is that when you're involved with one of these teams, there's a 70% chance if you want to stay at home, you're going to be able to stay at home and that you won't have crises at end of life. But if you look at a family who's not involved with these services, it's a 50-50 chance that they're going to end up in the hospital or at least yo-yoing in and out of emergency care. So we want to continue as we grow these hospitals or the hospices to expand these kinds of outreach services. And so we're actively talking with Niagara Health about that reinvestment of these hospital funds as we take care of some of those end-of-life beds into the community. And that's an exciting model, and the province is also very interested in to see how we can further that kind of investment from hospitals and community. And of course, one of our fastest growing services in Niagara is our bereavement care. So we run over 250 groups a year from anywhere as young as 5 years old to adult to help people adjust after losing a loved one and to really learn again what that new normal is for them, and it's different for everybody. And I'm excited to say that we recently partnered with Pastone to see how we can refer back and forth between our organizations to help deal with the wait lists that exist for kids around mental health, and how we can be involved sooner before there's some serious issues or behavior problems, and looking at how we can coordinate that between two organizations. So all of this is really about good integration and good care and good spending of our healthcare dollars.
Good, thank you, Carol. And just at my time with you at Hospice Niagara, I think the thing I walked away with was the dignity that you provide and the few people that we were able to speak to, and how, you know, that kind of came back to me is how you do provide that dignity both within your physical building in St. Catharines, but in homes across Niagara, and allow that choice for people. So I think it's great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Before we let you go, Carol, I'm going to bring Mr. Bowles on the line here. Brian, if you can come in. Brian, this is something that council can refer to the budget process for deliberations. Is that fine?
To yourself as mayor, that is perfectly fine.
Okay. Can I get a consensus from council to send this to budget? Is that fine? Okay. Online, guys, is that all fine with everybody? Consensus, I don't need to vote on that? You're fine with that? Madam Clerk, we're just forwarding this to that. Okay. Okay, Carol, that's going to go to our budget process, which Mr. Bowles is putting together for us. And hopefully you'll be hearing some good news from us once we're completed our budget. Again,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Next, we have a presentation from staff. We have CAO Scott Louie and Gary Long, our Manager of Strategic Initiatives, regarding the Strategic Plan 2020-2025. Mr. Louie, would you take this away, please?
Sure. Am I on now?
Sorry, yes, you are.
Okay. Thanks, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Council, I know the strategic plan process started in May of last year. We did hit some bumps along the road schedule-wise, and then the very night that we were planning on bringing a PowerPoint to Council with an update was the first night of our modified meeting format in March, I believe March 23rd. So that was shelved temporarily in the meantime, and the consultant who facilitated the sessions was planning on presenting that. In the meantime, we do have an employee, Gary Long, who is the Manager of Strategic Initiatives, who has picked up the rest of the process from that facilitator. So hopefully he's going to take us the rest of the way to implementing the strategic plan and take over from the facilitator who held those sessions that council had. We've also had more sessions you'll hear from Mr. Long that included staff around vision and values of the organization. So the work is ready to get started again. And this is an update that tells council sort of where we are in the process. And because I'm remote today and Mr. Long is in the council chambers, I will turn it over to him for a presentation.
Great, thanks, Scott. Gary, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Steele, and good evening, Council. I'm pleased to join our CAO and municipal staff to provide an update on the progress of our strategic plan document. I'm pleased to inform Council that this plan is under development, and we just want to find out from Council if we're on the right track. So we'll just go through a couple of slides, and both the CAO and I would welcome any questions or comments that you have at the end. I guess if I could ask the Deputy Clerk to move to slide number 3, please. Okay, the next one? Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. So just to pick up on what Scott has, or what our CAO has already mentioned, we are making progress on the document itself. We would like to be in a position to come back to Council before the end of this year with a final draft document for your review. For those of you who have worked with strat plans in the past, a strategic plan is and will be for us a guiding document for council and for staff, and it will help us set priorities. It will help council make decisions. It will help us allocate our resources. We can work with council and Mr. Bowles and others in making sure that our strat plan is integrated into our capital and operating budgets as well. I think it's important to have a document for staff that brings all of us together, all of our city divisions, all of our city departments, to focus on common goals, a common vision, and really to work with council on a shared agenda to move the city and our community forward. Next slide, please. So the strategic plan will be comprised of the following components. It will have a mission and a vision statement that will speak to what do we do now, and then the vision statement will speak to where do we see ourselves going in the future? Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in the next 10 years? And the mission statement will provide some commentary in terms of how we can achieve the vision. The guiding principles will reflect our values, our beliefs. How do we show up every day as public service professionals? What do we stand for as a council? What do we stand for as city staff? So that's important to help us with policy development and with decision making. We'll talk about the strategic pillars in a couple of minutes. There will also be several action items, several initiatives that will support each strategic pillar. And then I think a key component of the document will be the implementation plan. So that will include sort of resource allocation for each action item and initiative and how those things will be measured as well. Next slide, please. So our CAO talked about the roundtable discussions that were held in 2019 and 2020 that were facilitated by a consultant. From those discussions, there were several pillars or priorities that were generated. I took those pillars and I'll say I finessed them a little bit. So I've put these in draft form, and I certainly welcome your comments and questions tonight. By no means are these in stone. So, but these are the pillars that council and staff came up with during the conversations and roundtable discussions over the course of the last 18 months. So I welcome your comments on that a bit later. Next slide, please. So just some general comments. The strategic plan will not speak to what we do on a day-to-day basis. The strat plan is very forward-thinking, it's very visionary, it's about establishing goals, it's about establishing priorities, and then having some action items and working together as a team to realize the vision that the council and staff have come up with. The next point is that once the strategic plan is finalized and adopted by council, by no means is that it. In fact, I would say it's just the beginning. We want our strategic plan to be a living document. We want it to be used by council and staff and the community on a regular basis, a daily basis. And we also want to make sure that the plan has flexibility so that when all of us are caught off guard by COVID or something like that, that we have a plan that is adaptable and flexible. The third point is that what I would say is that in the 6 or 7 weeks that I've been working here, one of the observations I have is that there are many projects and initiatives underway by city staff. City staff are working hard. City staff are working strategically. City staff are working on a number of projects that will fit very nicely into the strategic plan document. So my point is that we're not starting from scratch. We're already on track. What we need to do is to take those projects and initiatives that staff are already working on and put them into a strategic plan and make sure that we are working in a coordinated fashion and making sure that we are working in a consistent strategic direction. The next point, it's important that, and I think one of the things that the strategic plan will do for us is it will provide a line of sight. So by that I mean we want to make sure that staff see a connection between their current work and their job responsibilities and how that connects and relates to the larger vision for the organization and how their work fits into the organization's sort of core priorities. So I think that's something that we can look forward to. I would also recommend that council and the community are provided with quarterly progress reports. And I would also say that a critical success factor in our strategic plan will be leadership oversight of the plan from the CAO and the leadership team here at the city, as well as the broader management group. Next slide, please. So the CAO and I have outlined what we see as next steps and timelines. They're aggressive, but at the same time, we feel they are realistic. Both the CAO and myself and members of the management team want to keep this process moving. We'd like to have a draft strat plan in front of council before the end of this year for you to review and then for you to adopt. Between now and then, myself and the CAO and others have more sort of roundtable discussions internally with staff just to finalize some other initiatives. But we believe that we can keep to this timeline. And then once we receive council approval later this year, we would have the document rolled out internally, but also externally. We would want to generate some publicity using our corporate communications and social media presence to be able to do that. So, Mayor Steele, that's all I have for my part of the presentation, and both the CIO and I would be pleased to take any questions.
Great, Mr. Long, thank you. You want to pull our online people? Okay. Councillors that are online, any questions to either the CIO or Mr. Long? Don't see any. In the chambers, any questions tonight? Councillor Baggy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's been a year and a half since we sat there on table, most council members. Can you refresh my memory? What is supporting and investing in human capital?
Gary?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As I understand that strategic priority, it's really about investing in city staff, investing in council, investing in volunteers who serve on our council committees and other stakeholder organizations. So, for example, under, say, investing in staff, there would be a number of initiatives, I would say strategic HR initiatives that many are underway now, but we would also want to pursue others around succession planning, recruitment and retention, performance management, evaluation systems, and that sort of thing.
Councillor? Thank you very much. One of the questions, we had the young leaders participate in our roundtable discussions. Is that still active, or I haven't heard nothing about it lately, but just wondering if it's still active, the young leaders.
I'll go to the CAO, Mr. Louis.
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bagu, we did have a new cohort of leaders. We identified 12 people from different departments at the start of the year in January. We had one session based on the same material or the same training program as the prior year, and then we disbanded the program because of COVID and the ability to meet in person and meet face to face. We are still doing some training on a remote basis, but separate from the leadership program. The other, success story about the leadership program in 2020 is we were able to partner with Fort Erie, where they have a similar program, actually started after our program and modeled on our program. And we were working on bringing in speakers to the larger group and having some crossover, some cross-pollination between Fort Erie and Port Colborne for development purposes. But like I said, unfortunately, this has been sort of shelved because of COVID. We do hope to get back to it as soon as we're able to meet in groups again.
Councillor?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much. Look forward to the next session. Councillors' items, staff responses to previous councillor items or inquiries. happen to be there, Madam Deputy Clerk? I've lost everybody. Do you want to get out and get back in? Yes. Okay. Click that. There, they're back. Can't get rid of you guys that easy. Okay, so staff, so I have Mr. Shapowski, you're up.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Council. Just a couple updates from the last Council meeting. The first is Councillor Wells previously brought forward the issue of off-road vehicles entering the beaches through the city's lake end roads. I wanted to let Council know that we have confirmed that there are sections requiring blockages, and our roads division is currently determining the best solution to block these sections. So you'll be seeing this work implemented in the near future. Again, this will be a temporary measure up until our lake end road study is completed. Also, in response to Councillor Bruno's inquiry to the city's audible pedestrian signals, the city currently has 19 crossings, of which 7 use an audible signal. I mentioned I would provide a basis for installation costs should the thought be to upgrade these crossings in the future. A typical audible pedestrian signal installation is approximately $12,000, and that's dependent upon existing infrastructure. For full AODA compliance, tactile pads would need to be installed and the buttons installed within 1.5 meters of the actual crossing. So costs would increase if poles need to be relocated to accommodate these requirements. That's it.
Great, Mr. Shapowski, thank you. Any other staff members? Staff in here, yeah? You guys have nothing here? Okay. Mr. CAO, do you have anything? No, you're all set? Okay. I'll, can't remember if I started online last week. Councillor Wells, did I start online last week with questions, or did I start in the chamber? Do you remember?
Started online.
Did I? Okay, we'll start in the chamber, and I'll start with Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one issue that's still outstanding for me. And this is through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan Aquilina. It's in regards to the Nyan public meeting. There has been some questions and some concerns in regards to what exactly Nyan is requesting, and with regards to the holding designation on the zoning. So I was wondering if Mr. Aquilina could clarify that situation in the public realm.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. On November the 2nd, Council and the public will hear the technical amendment being proposed by Nyan Oil to site-specifically change the wording in the bylaw to not require the site plan agreement or the private servicing first before the holding is removed. So that is what is going to be before council on the 2nd. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
So just to clarify, site-specific will still apply, correct? At once we move, if we move forward or they move forward with this?
You're correct, Mr. Mayor. The current zoning, the HI-46-H, that will be before council for consideration to remove the actual requirement of site plan control and again the private servicing. So in order for the development to occur, a site plan agreement would be required after the wording of the bylaw changes.
Okay, Councillor?
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Good.
One other question, Dan. I noticed on my travels that the public hearing signs have come down for some reason. I'm not sure whether the MTO cutting the grass chewed them up or whether they were taken down by weather conditions. Do you know anything about those, Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, we surmise the same thing, that possibly the MTO had removed them. I can confirm that Nyan has posted a notice again on the property. This time the poster is actually attached to the fence along the property line. Prior to, it was on a stake in the ground a little closer to the road allowance. We can't confirm that it was removed by the MTO, but if I'm a betting man, I would say that would be my number one guess.
Thanks, Dan.
All set, Councillor? Thank you. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I started out with 4, but after Mr. Szapowski answered that question, I'll say I have 3.5 questions tonight. Thank you, Steve, for that on the crosswalks. I received your list of those. I perhaps want to pass that along to the citizen who brought that to my attention, who is visually impaired, as well perhaps over to the accessibility committee if they have any comments, and maybe we can circle back and revisit that. So thank you, Steve. The second item up is, I happen to have an inquiry by someone who asked when our local development charges were anniversarizing and going up. But council recall that we took a 20% a year approach from 0 DC charges on single family homes, not infills. As it turned out, this gentleman wants to get going. When I did the research for him, I found out that the Port Colborne development charges takes its next 20% increase, approximately $1,300, on November 12th. That was a tight time frame for him, but it brought into mind when I looked at the regional development charges, which are much higher. They anniversarize on December 31st. There is no posting yet as to what the region single-family residential development charges will be come January 1st, but again, I haven't re-looked at that for about a week. My question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Aquilina, I think it would be helpful if we could synchronize our development charge anniversary and increases with that of the region. I think we're always looking for ways to make it easier for the developer, taxpayer to do things. And since the development charges are collected by City Hall for the region, it seems to me eminently wise to sync those two. I'm wondering, first half of my question is, would you be able to extend that deadline to December 31st in sync with the region? Well, let me ask that first.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruno, yes, we can do that. It would be a simple bylaw amendment by council to, as you mentioned, coincide to what the region is doing. So it'll be something to be brought back to council for consideration to match the region's bylaw.
Can that be done fairly quickly, Mr. Aquilina, as really it's just a date change within the bylaw? Is that something that can come back fairly quickly to us?
Through Mr. Mayor, or to you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, it could be done. It's just a matter of having the bylaw wording before council for consideration. So I am thinking you would get that next meeting or the meeting thereafter.
Is that fine, Councillor?
It is. I'm only concerned that I believe that change is this 13th in the current format, and I believe our next council meeting is it the 16th? 9th. Okay, so it will be before. No, that would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering if I can put a public service announcement out to any citizen, builder, anyone that's contemplating building a single-family residence in Port Colborne. It would be an opportunity for you to get your application in this year, save approximately $1,300, and whatever the region is going to extend its development charges by on January 1st. So I'm hoping that will be people who are on the cusp of whether to build or not, could get it, go online, get your building application filled out, get it in prior, well, hopefully it'll be extended. I guess I would just ask you to get it in as soon as possible, and there'll be some savings for you to put towards your house. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. My next question is in regards to Barrack Road. This will go out to Ms. Hanson, the mayor who's been involved in this, and Director Shapowski. So there's still ongoing problems of truck traffic using Barrack Road. I know the mayor has been working with the new staff sergeant here, coming up with some enforcement, and I understand the next meeting you'd be able to get us some at least anecdotal figures on that. In the meantime, I'm wondering through you to Ms. Hanson if she would be able to, and this is not pointing the finger that they're their haulage companies, but companies in that vicinity of Elm and Barrack that might most likely be having some of these trucks using Barrack Road. If those businesses could be contacted and ask them to notify their trucking companies to please use Stonebridge. And through you to Mr. Shapowski. Steve, I'm wondering, your predecessor had been charged with looking at the Highway 58 entrance to Stonebridge for some signage on there so truckers don't commit too far down 58, find out at Barrack they're seeing a no truck sign, and just in concert with that, it is a bit difficult, I'm sure, for an 18-wheeler to turn the corner there at Barrack and then see the no truck sign. So I'm wondering both on the corner of Barrack and 58, and in particular at Stonebridge, I think there was discussions to be had with the MTO, if we could get some signage there indicating to these out-of-town truckers or one-time truckers that that is the truck route, not Barrack Road. Ms. Hanson, Steve?
So I'll go to Ms. Hanson first with regards to sending out notification. I know the city's done it in the past. Is that something we can do again?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruno, yes, we can have a chat with the companies and ask them if they can deal with the trucking companies, as well as put the Niagara Regional Police on notice with regards to truckers using a non-truck route.
Okay, thank you. You're all right with that one? Yep. Steve, with regards to the signage on Highway 58?
Yeah, through you, your worship, to Councillor Bruno. Right now, I actually have a meeting scheduled with the MTO for this week to discuss a couple other issues regarding signage on the MTO. So I can actually bring that up at the exact same meeting, and we can get some progress moving on that. And I can provide another update at the next council meeting.
Good. Councillor?
Great, thank you. And lastly, while we're on the topic of signs, as you know, we've had quite a bit of success in the last year removing this detritus from our roadsides and hydro poles. It appears that there's been a resurgence in the last 3 to 4 weeks, and I want to thank Mr. Earhart and his crew for collectively picking up over 30 commercial signs along our roadsides, residential and Main Street and other arterial roads. I understand that that particular commercial entity was apprised, at least by a voice message, to cease and desist, and that we may have their signs. I'm not sure if we have the signs or they've been disposed of. Since then, which I wasn't aware till the other day when I drove by two returning signs from that commercial entity, that they were back in a much stronger force, some 30-odd signs to complement the 30 that were taken down by Mr. Earhart and his crew. Having just a conversation with Councillor Baggio on an entirely different issue, he mentioned that he has picked up 30 signs himself just in Ward 1 from this particular vendor and deposited them with the city. So my question is, one, through you to Ms. Hanson. Can we actually take legal action against these commercial vendors who are putting up signs on our roadway? Why don't I leave, that'll be my first question, through you to Ms. Hanson.
Mrs. Hanson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Bruno, the city has the opportunity to take the company to task with regards to legal action. We don't have any short form wording and set fines, so there's no ticketable offense, but we could deal with it through court action, lay informations, and take the individual to court.
Great, thank you, and thank you for all that you've put into this, and to, again, to Public Works. Secondly, to our CAO, one of the things in talking to the supervisor there, they do have a road patrol, but it's city's divided into 8 units, and they're not always there at the same time. And they've done a marvelous job in taking down the 200 and some odd signs on poles, et cetera, at the beginning of this program. But just in the last 2 weeks to ask them to do that, I'm wondering if, through you to the CAO, who can perhaps direct across department lines, we have a lot of city staff that are out there in various vehicles, whether they're parks, ops, bylaw, et cetera, et cetera. Is there an opportunity to do a team approach whereby, you know, if you see it, you can do something about it without it being specified just to roads or to bylaw? So I'm looking to see if it doesn't have to be some department's particular job, and that there doesn't need to be any kind of work order issued. It just becomes something that we all join in on to keep our community beautiful. Thank you.
CAO?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno. Yes, absolutely. Part of that strategic plan, you know, that was just presented earlier is about getting the message out to the community and to the employees and to the council that there is one department. It's the entire city. All the folks who drive here in vehicles, whether it's bylaw, building, parks, or roads, are working for the city and keeping the city clean. So I will make sure that that message is communicated through the directors to all the different staff who are around town. I can't always say that someone will jump out and take a sign down, but I can make sure that at least if they can't take it down, they report it. But that we get those signs either taken down right on the spot, or we make sure that they're reported to dispatch so that a roads worker can take them down if that person, for whatever reason, doesn't have the tools or can't get out of the vehicle to take it down on the spot. So the short answer is yes.
Councillor?
Thank you. Actually, Mr. CEO, appreciate that. Actually, you reminded me of one other thing that we've all as councillors been slowly being indoctrinated into, and that is our customer service representatives. I failed to mention that a lot of the times the reporting is being done by concerned citizens around Port Colborne, and they've called the works yard and spoken to councillors, and that's been relayed. And I wanted to thank the citizens that have called, and I'm just wondering that if anyone who's watching, or if this is reported, that they too can call the main switchboard number at City Hall, and if they wait online, they'll get a customer service representative, and that can be logged and directed to a city department. So I'd ask citizens out there if they could join us in helping to upgrade the look of our city and roadside by reporting those incidents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And you threw me off my script tonight when you asked me the GeoRail question under the mayor's report, because I had it down at your name under councillors' items and the staff responses. But Councillor Bruno, I do want to thank you with regards to GeoRail, because you were an intricate part of that. You dealt with a number of constituents in the Portal Village area. I know you had some meetings with them. You actually spoke with Neil Johnson and gave you his ideas as well through the CAO in my office. So it's not that I missed you above, it's just that my notes weren't there. They were down where I thought you would ask that question, because you had asked me about this, about the new fence earlier. So I do apologize for not picking those notes up earlier. But again, as I said, it is a team here. and we work very well as a team, so thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Next is Councillor Bagu. Well, I'm going to go around. You're next. Oh,
I want to ask a question to you.
to what he said? Oh, sure. If you have a question to the councillor, yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps it's not even Gary, maybe it's Miss Hanson, but I'm just wondering, we have all these signs telling us to phone this number if we want to sell a house. Why aren't we phoning that number and just telling them, people, pick up these signs? They're going in the garbage. Would it help? I don't know, Miss Hanson, what do you think?
Well, like I just said, at the beginning of what I said was actually Public Works, Dwight, that call did go.
Oh, he did?
To that company.
He did.
But it was just a voicemail, and the message was left about, stop doing this. And to the best of my knowledge, there's been no response.
Because when I saw the sign, there's a whole new slew of them, and I was thinking I should just call them and say, come get your signs, we're going to throw them in the garbage. Or,
Maybe Ms. Hanson doesn't.
Yeah, maybe. Do you know anything about that, Ms. Hanson?
Ms. Hanson, can you enlighten us?
Have you been able to talk to anyone on those signs at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kalalev, we most likely can get a hold of the phone number and get the individual. We will contact them and make it very clear to them that this is an unwarranted and unwanted situation about erecting these signs, and that any further action on our part will be legal action if he continues to do so. So we will have that chat with him.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno, was that like a large scoring word in Scrabble that you used in your opening on signs? I can't remember what the word was, but...
The word was detritus.
Detritus, yes.
And I picked it up years ago in a previous employment where we were doing a cleanup on various properties. And so we encompassed gnomes and signs and chicken wire fences all under that one word. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I just thought maybe you played Scrabble over the weekend. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bruno. I learned a new word today. It sounds like a dentist's word, though. I have a few things. One, I do apologize to actually Director Shipakowski because I did give a late inquiry regarding the community entranceway signs to the city, how we used to have with the service clubs on them. And I know it went to a senior management meeting way back in December of 2019, and he did promise me he will have an answer for council next meeting, which I greatly appreciate. I see Smithville, we did their highways and they got new signs up now, so I just figure with the Wynn government out and this new government in, maybe it's allowed now, I got no idea, for so many dollars. The next item is the status of the operation of the Vale Center walking track. I know it opened up, I'm just wondering how it was going, and I have a couple of inquiries on whether we can expand our operating times to the evening ones to 8 o'clock like we used to do. So I just want to bring that up for...
Ms. Craig, can you answer that question for the councillor?
Good evening, members of council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. Yes, since the beginning or the reopening of the walking track at the beginning of September, we've seen 225 walkers visit the track since that time, and that's an average of 15 walkers per day. Beginning, the uptake in terms of utilization rates were slow. However, we've been seeing that steadily increase, and we expect to see that continue to increase as the weather grows cooler with the change in the season. Certainly, with regard to operation overall at the Vale Health and Wellness Center, we review, monitor, and consider the ability to increase services on an active basis. And at this point in time, the only barrier to increasing our ability to increase hours has been mainly to do with our ability as a staff to control and monitor compliance with the mandatory mask requirements as well as the facility occupancy maximum. So understanding certainly that as the weather grows cooler, that we'll be looking at and encountering an increasing demand for the walking track and access to the walking track. Certainly as staff, we will look to bring in evening hours and reinstate those as soon as possible once again.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Director Greg. I really appreciate it. And a couple of the residents greatly appreciate that also. My next concern is I brought this up before, probably a year and a half ago, is the recycling bins that the Environmental Advisory Committee Finance have put out on West Street. I don't know now with a new garbage pickup, does the region pick up empty the garbage? As the ones on West Street, the 2 cans have not been emptied in 2 weeks. And I know I talked to Parks and Rec manager Nicole about emptying the regular garbage out there because they're overflowing before, but I did not get an answer on the recycle bins on West Street also, how often they're emptied and who actually takes ownership of them to get emptied.
Ms. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Bagu. That is something that I can certainly, at this point in time, I'll say that we have decreased or returned back to our off-season schedule for collection, which is twice a week. During the summer, we had increased collections, but with regards specifically to happy to confirm with staff about how often the recycling is collected. My understanding was that it was collected at a municipal level and then remitted to the region of Niagara. However, I will be happy to follow up with staff and then report back to the councillor via email and then also at the next council meeting.
Councillor?
Thank you very much, Director Greg. My last one is a lot bigger one. I received 2 phone calls last night regarding homeless people in the downtown core. One person was sleeping in the City Hall atrium, and one person was in King George Park sleeping underneath a picnic table / tree. When I sent my concern in today, this afternoon, all of a sudden the picnic tables were gone, which I find a very much coincidence. But I drove by the atrium this morning at 6:30 in the morning. There's also 2 more people in there sleeping in our City Hall atrium, which I guess is left open for the bus people, I imagine. And basically my concern is people are seeing this and they feel the compassion for the homeless and they don't know what to do. I don't direct them to call the police because the police are just going to say, move on, pack your sleeping bag up and move on. And I know it's hard in this day and age with mental health issues for a lot of people. And I'm just wondering how our city, because it is happening on city property, how our city staff, I guess, can get the right help for the people. They need compassion, they need to get help. I know people don't want help a lot of times, and they go away for a day or so, and all of a sudden they're back the next day or 2 days later, and I don't know really what to do, Mr. Mayor. The other issue is the atrium itself, because there are people sleeping there in the nighttime, and then in the daytime there's people waiting in the inclement weather for buses, whether that atrium is disinfected due to the COVID situation here, Mr. Mayor. And so basically I'm just looking for some sort of direction. I noticed that, the person's not under the tree tonight, but he was this morning, and I saw him at 7-Eleven getting a free breakfast, and I felt a lot of compassion, but how are we going to help these people? It's getting colder. It's going to be freezing a couple of days this week. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking for some sort of direction from you.
So I'll turn to our CAO and to bylaws, Mrs. Hanson, to take this question.
So Through your worship to Councillor Bagu, I'll answer your questions in reverse order. City Hall cleaning has been in the past, pre-COVID, once per day after work was over or after City Hall closed at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. We have since stepped that amount of cleaning up and increased it due to COVID. There is cleaning during the daytime, and that does include the atrium of City Hall. So that I can confirm. The atrium of City Hall is, as you mentioned, the bus stop, and it's set to stay open as long as the buses are running, which is after City Hall is closed. So people can allow themselves in there, and then the doors lock automatically at the same time as the bus schedule is finished for the day. So unfortunately, people can get in there and stay in there overnight. To answer your first question, I can confirm that I do have an address for, an email address that is, for homeless outreach workers at the region. I can't say for sure if that's a public email address or if that's for city staff to use, but what I can promise you is that I'll confirm that and bring back to the next council meeting. In the meantime, if anyone, a resident, a council member or so on, has the, comes across or sees in their daily travels some people who are in need of shelter, if they call our customer service operators at the front desk of City Hall, that's 905-835-2900. There is a recorded message, but it will be live answered when the recorded message is over. I will make sure those CSRs have the email address for the region and can send the information along. So I want to be clear to Councillor Bagu's point about compassion and so on. These are outreach workers. They're social workers who will help the people who are in need with housing and with other support services. It's not, passing the problem down the line to the next municipality or treating them as trespassers and making it a criminal type intervention. This is a social services intervention designed to get these folks the help they need. So I can assure you that I will take care of that, and I will come back on the November 9th council meeting and let you know if I can distribute that email address more widely than just keeping it for staff's use.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to CEO, could you probably get the address before the next council meeting, before 2 weeks from now? It would be helpful to get a little bit sooner.
Sure. Sorry. Through your worship to Councillor Bagu, when I'm done speaking here, I'll get on my email and after the council meeting, and I'll ask the region worker if I'm allowed to give this email address out. If I am, I'll give it to you right away, and I'll read it out loud at the next council meeting.
And I know Councillor Demery had her hand up, and I think she's probably going to have a very similar answer as what I would have, but Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, the police are fully equipped to deal with the situation. They do have instant access to the outreach workers, and it is something they will do. They don't just simply move the people along unless they have some inside information about why they would be doing that. That would make it different than other situations. But they will reach out to all of the outreach workers. Port Colborne is set up through the portal table and through the social determinants of health committee. There's lots of help out there. And those social workers can be accessed almost immediately. The police are probably the very best way of dealing with it for the average resident to reach out. That's the best way to do it.
Correct, Councillor, and thank you, because I know you're co-chair of the social determinants of health. We've talked about that. We have our partnership with the Niagara Regional Police there, the Portal table, which is something that the entire region is looking at expanding, and we were the first with that here in Port Colborne. And the Niagara Regional Police are also partnered with that. So exactly what Councillor Demery said, if you do call the police, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, unless they're committing a crime, you can't arrest somebody just because they're homeless and sleeping. It is a sad situation, as Councillor Bagu mentioned, but the police do have their contacts with the proper organizations across Niagara that can help, the region being one of those. I know Port Care they've used it locally. But there are several avenues that we have to help these people. So, don't be afraid to call the police. But again, with our customer service representatives here during the opening hours of City Hall, when you call, we can at least get you that information, which Mr. Louie will get out to us and then to our staff. So, You all set, Counselor?
At just one point, Mr. Mayor, to you, I did notice the one gentleman in King George Park. He's been there for quite a few weeks, and I'm surprised it's taken this long that nobody has done anything, whether it's police officer driving by, even stopping and doing a health check on him. But I will keep up, and when I get that email or phone numbers, I will call definitely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, if it is the same gentleman, my understanding is that he was removed. They looked at the outreach for him, and he was not around for a while, then now he's back. So I don't know the situation, but I'm sure they'll be helping him as we move along. Ms. Hanson has a question here, or for some comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to inform council that the Niagara Regional Police are aware of the issue at the City Hall bus shelter entrance, and that they are keeping an eye on it after hours, after 9 o'clock, early in the morning, to ensure that people that are in there that shouldn't be in there, because it is not allowed to be there, and they are keeping an eye on that for us, as well as we dealt with the homeless individual this morning at the park and brought him over to Port Care to try and get him some help, as well as remove all of the debris and needles and other issues that were left in the park. We have spoken to him on several occasions, but then he disappears for a while, and he's not there. His stuff is there, but he's not there. So that situation has been somewhat resolved. We have removed the picnic tables from the parks and cleaning up the park areas, so that hopefully this doesn't continue on.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Councillor, you're set?
Actually, thank you, Mrs. Hanson, for taking care of that this morning.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clayliff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to thank Councillor Bagu. I actually was one of the calls that called him last night, because you're just kind of not knowing what to do when you come upon these people, and I know it's difficult. And I want to also thank Ms. Hanson as well for taking care of this. Sometimes it's hard to take care of people who don't want to be taken care of, and I think this is part of the situation that we've got. But anyway, thank you very much for all that you did today, and it's good to be able to give out those numbers to people, because I do have questions as well from other people that are seeing these people, and we need to reach out and figure out what to do. So thank you on that. On my councillor's items, I just had a question again for Ms. Hanson, and this is regarding, thank you very much for getting back to me today regarding West Street and the parking issue. It's kind of coming back to haunt us again. I did think that we were going to be getting the signage this summer. We had given some council direction. I understand with COVID, all the delay and things. At the end of your email, you told me that the service request had gone in. I've had a couple people asking me about it. Did the request just go in now, or is it the one that we had asked for this summer? Like, how soon can we look for these signage change?
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Clayliff, the sign request change recently went in with all of the COVID issues that bylaws dealing with, parks patrols and everything else, curbsides. Bylaws very busy with COVID, and it was a missed issue that we thought went in already from engineering, but it has now been placed in the queue. And depending on the contractors with regards to getting signage, so some of the companies are delayed in getting product to us, so that we put it on a high request to get it resolved as soon as possible. Steve might be able to answer a little bit more with regards to how quickly some of the materials are coming in.
But thank you. I'll wait to hear from him, but thank you on that, because I can actually talk with a couple of the owners and just tell them it did get missed because of everything that's been going on, but it is in there now, and they can expect it soon. Thank you. And I don't know if Steve has anything to add.
Mr. Shapowski, timelines on receiving these signs, approximately?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Clayliff. I'll look into this tomorrow, and I'll provide an update to Councillor Clayliff directly and the rest of council, and I'll also provide an update at the next council meeting as to timelines to achieve this.
Thank you.
Thank you. My next one also is also for Mr. Shapowski as well, I think, and it's just a kind of a question from me, but I've had it from a few people. I noticed all the colored markings that are going on the streets. I've just assumed it was tripping hazards, different things on the street and on sidewalks. I'm correct, right? The pink that's going down?
Mr. Shapowski?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Kalaleff, you're exactly correct. Every year we do an annual sidewalk review, and it involves staff walking each sidewalk within the city and actually marking out any trip hazards that we do see. So anything that is noted as a hazard, it is identified through a pink paint mark. So that's what you would be seeing right now, and this is what formulates our repair list for the following year.
Is there any way, Mr. Shapowski, that we could maybe working with Alex Peterson from the media on our website? The questions I've had asked to me, I actually explained exactly what you said, and I said I'm sure that from what I knew, the pink was a tripping hazard. People were a little bit concerned. They weren't sure what the different colors were, and they were, kind of querying. And I said, well, I think it's a tripping hazard. I would double check. But could we maybe put something out on our website just so that people know when they see all these different colored lines? Like the lady said to me, well, we've got some blue ones, and now somebody came by with pink. And I said, well, I think the pink's tripping. But maybe that would be a good education piece for everybody in the city, just so they know what the different colors mean for the lines, so that what to expect when they see them.
Mr. Shapowski?
Yeah, through Your Worship, to Councillor Kalaleff, that's a great idea, and I'll talk to Alex tomorrow, and we can start a communication piece about it. It's a great idea.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. And I think that's it for me. I also wanted to just say thank you to the mayor and the CAO regarding the portable washroom. Many thanks from some of the businesses over by the canal. Very pleased. People are happy that we went ahead and put that back. And that's it.
Thank you. Online, Councillor Bodnar.
Nothing tonight.
Super. Councillor Danch.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I've got a huge list here, but it only deals with one item, and it's to Gary, our newest economic kind of guy, I guess. I'm not sure what we even define him as. It's from the BIA on the Main Street side and the downtown BIA. We've struggled the last couple of years with the lights on the street. We've been putting them back together with Band-Aids for the last couple of years, and it's not working, obviously. They're tired, they're old, and it's time for replacement. The two BIAs have been talking, virtually, of course, or with that thing called the telephone. And we have a ship design that I probably should have sent it to you all, but I just got this thrown in my lap. And we're looking at purchasing 40 lighted ships that would go on the poles along West Street, Clarence Street, and down Main Street, and including the east side. 40 of these items, we would like to get it together, and the BIAs are willing to pay a portion of it, of course, because nothing comes for free. We've done some math on our own side, and there's a potential grant available to do this for approximately $15,000. And this is where Gary comes in, because we need him to apply for this before December the 1st, because that's when the cutoff is. Delivery on this item is 5 weeks. That puts us to the first week of December, which is kind of gearing up for that Christmas season that we don't know what's going to be like, but it would certainly enhance the streets a little bit and give it some life. I'm just gonna read a note here that was kind of sent to me so that I don't read it incorrectly. I, the council, pass a motion to waive the rules of procedure to allow a motion to be considered regarding the approval of lights in the BIAs, and once the majority vote passes, that council approves, and this, the $40,000 want is a total ask, but the BIAs would be putting in approximately $30,000 over the next 2 years to be spent on new decorative lights for the downtown and Main Street BIAs. I know you guys are looking at me and thinking, what's Frank come up with here now? It's a nice ship. It would go up on the poles.
So Councillor,
quality,
Councillor,
yes.
before you go on, because we have to waive procedural bylaw first, I'm going to start with that, then you can get into exactly everything you want, or you're looking for, that you want. So you're moving it. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Bruno. Any discussion on waiver of procedure? I'm seeing none. All those in favor, please raise their hand. That's carried unanimously. So, Councillor, you're going to have a motion to go on the floor that the city contribute along with the BIAs. My only question is, Councillor, is with regards to the grant, is this part of that, or is this over and above that, and then we would get more money when the grant, if the grant is approved? Because you're looking to have the money now to order it, but knowing how grants work within the province, a lot of times you can't spend the money first and expect to get money back. I just don't want to see us lose out on anything. So did you get any information on that?
And like I said, this kind of just got dropped in my lap, and we can certainly talk if we need to. The grant option was, like I said, it was like $15,000, and both BIAs are willing to put some money into it. Let's face it, this last year has been trying for everybody. Neither one of the BIAs has really spent any of the monies that have been collected, and we're certainly willing to put this back into the community where it's supposed to go. I'm just asking if maybe Gary could get this giddy up going on this grant application. We have the funds available both on the downtown and Main Street BIA to put this money up front. And if I was more computer knowledgeable, I would probably be able to send you a picture of what it looked like. If I did, I might leave the meeting for a bit and send it to you all. It's a smart looking design. It's LED, of course, and it's something that will last several years. And I'm just looking at my little note here, and like I say, we're just trying to get something going for the city.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you move that. And what's the dollar value for the city that you're looking at?
Total cost is $40,000. The BIAs, both of us, would put in $7,300 each. So 14,600 times 2, and the city would hopefully get the rest through that grant. So it's kind of like a no cost to the city if everything works out, and it would enhance the community on both ends. That's my ask from the downtown and Main Street BIA.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as a motion to put on the. Well, I need a motion first, Councillor. So I'm going to take the motion first to put this on the floor. I have Councillor Danch. Have somebody second that? Councillor Wells. Councillor Clell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm familiar with what Councillor Dench is talking about, and I think it's a great idea. I like the idea of being able to get them up sooner than later. My suggestion would be, I know the concern that you have regarding the grant for December the 1st, and if we wanted to get these up, we might not meet that grant piece, but my suggestion would be that we go ahead and apply for that grant and purchase additional decorations, the same decorations, the sailboat, or not sailboat, the schooner, the same ones, and we put them up on the east side, on East Kalali, as well as on the other side of the bridge. There's always room to add to these, and my understanding is that the manufacturer would keep the template for a number of years, so they would be able to reproduce them if we need more. But the nice part of this is there is money available through the grant program Light Up My City, but I had the same concern you did, that if we went ahead, we would lose this grant opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think that we could actually roll it into one, especially if the numbers are a little bit less. This is a bit less than I had heard. So if the numbers are less than what we originally thought, and you know, we can do this purchase and the monies are there, we could also go for the grant as well and use that towards additional ones.
Okay, Councillor Demeray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking through my emails that I had received earlier about this lighting, and the numbers don't add up from what Councillor Danch is saying and what the email says. And there is a photo of the lights that they're talking about. I'm just going to forward that to everyone. But I really like this idea, and I would very much support it. But I'm nervous about giving a carte blanche to go ahead and do this without actually having specific numbers and having the details about possible funding sources, that sort of thing. I think it's important enough, though, that maybe we could pull off an emergency meeting to actually resolve this so that we can get it done before the December 1st deadline, once we have this information.
Yes. So with that, Council, Mr. Long has left because of his issue is already he's already looked after what he was here for tonight, and he didn't know this was coming forward. So I'm going to have Mr. Bowles, and I would assume, Ms. Grigg, this would be through your department once this is done?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So Council, just for sake of discussion, with regards to budgeting, I'm going to ask Brian. Brian, if we can get yourself and Gary and Ashley together and discuss this with the two BIAs, just to get the numbers squared away like Councillor Demeray has asked, so that, you know, certainly the mayor can call a meeting and we can get this done pretty quick, and then move forward also with an application and the best avenue to do this, or the path forward. So if Council does this fairly quickly, Mr. Bowles, can obviously the dollars have to be found within our current budget. Is that going to be a detriment to us?
Yeah, through yourself to the rest of council. This year, as you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a number of events just that didn't happen, and the surpluses in some of those accounts are there to support a project such as this, and for the city to put its portion in. We're doing the forecast till year end, and we still forecast that we'd be able to be in a positive or at least a break-even position. So I'd put to council that if you decide to move forward with this, we could work this and still maintain our balanced position by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Councillor Bodnar?
That's nice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we better include in this the cost of putting them up too.
Yeah.
They're just not going to be, free to put up unless the city does it, and that's still a cost to us. So when you're figuring everything out, that should be in there also.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Grigg, you have a comment?
Thank you. Yes. The staff are aware of this request from the joint request from the Main Street and Downtown BIAs. In fact, I had prepared a report to go to the first meeting of council in November, understanding though that there is a timeline. That probably the timing of a first meeting in November may not have been suitable. I did, however, think that I might be able to provide some clarity on the costing. Staff received an indication at the very end of September that the BIAs were interested in moving to a year-round nautical theme LED displays on the light standards. So the manager of Parks and Recreation went forward and obtained a quote for 40 LED rope light displays to be shared between the two areas at a cost. The cost came in at $50,000. In addition, I can speak to the labor costs as well. From a staff perspective, if we move to a year-round light display, initially we would have realized a cost savings of approximately $7,500 annually for the installation and then tear down of the light displays at the mid-November to mid to late January each year. So installation for these light displays initially would cost about half of $7,500. And then also we would look to, as well from a supplier, talk to them about servicing as well as warranty.
Okay, Councillor Danch? Oh, you're muted. You're still muted. Not that that's a bad thing.
I thought I pushed that button. Okay. So anyways, it's 43.8. That was the total price. And then they say the two BIAs would share that. Yes, there's a cost to the city and all that kind of stuff, but we would try to get this grant if Mr. Long could get that going on. And I would like to see us make a move and say that you guys would support this, and we could maybe. And it's, you know, and I'm on Main Street every day. It's been a little trying and difficult. We've been patching these snowflakes that we had, and there's only so many light bulbs that you can put in, and so many pieces of wire that our electrician can keep patching together. I think this is a positive thing for the uptown, downtown BIAs, and I'd like to support from you guys, and if we could, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Long, do you have, now that Mr. Long's back, comments with regards to an application moving forward for, it's a deadline that we have to get in by December 1st. Is that something you can work with our staff, particularly Mr. Bowles, Ms. Grigg, and the BIAs to get that moving?
Through you, Your Worship, I'd be pleased to work with my colleagues to move and expedite an application to ensure we have these lights in a timely fashion.
Great, thank you, Mr. Long. Anybody else online have a question? No. Okay, Councillor Clayliff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just so that everybody is clear on this, these are year-round lights. They'll only have one installation cost. Once they go up, they stay up. They're there all year round for us. So that decreases. It's a really good cost savings on that end of it. As Councillor Danch said, you know, we will recoup a lot of this money just on not having to put them up and take them down all the time. And I know that the manager, Nicole, was aware of this, and she was in favor of it as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Wells and Councillor Bruno.
Through you, Your Worship, there may also be an opportunity to recoup some cost in selling the old lights or scrapping the old lights.
Councillor Bruno?
Thank you. I'm fully supportive of this initiative. I think the fact that they're not just Christmas lights, they're year-round is a real positive. I had been sent information about this and pricing, and when I looked at the only clarity I want to get is that on the, and I don't know if Frank can get this or he has it there, or somebody from Public Works could look at it. It talked about the company being one that provided Christmas decorative lights. They did indicate that this was year-round. But there was verbiage there, and I don't have it here in front of me, that talked about these lights needing to be power washed or cleaned in certain intervals. Long story short, it purported to me that they were using standards of the lights that you take down every year and how they had to be cleaned of, I think it was salt and pollution and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to make sure, and I'm sure we all would, that the company that's selling seasonal lights is selling now a year-round light, yet the user interface they sent with it talked about these things having to be cleaned every so often. And all I wanted to find out is that we wouldn't be buying lights that because they were year-round and they need to be cleaned, unless they were referring to seasonal lights, in a scenario that they would break down or not work well. So I think as long as someone in Public Works, Electrical looks at that aspect of it, I just want good value for the money. I think it's a great idea, though, something that we probably should have looked at years ago. And I think off the back of COVID, it's even a better idea right now. We need that lift.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch, do you have an answer to Councillor Bruno about the cleaning maintenance or anything on that, or is that something you don't have right now?
Yeah, you know what? And like I say, this got dropped in my lap shortly ago, and I don't know. Do we clean streetlights? I guess every 15 years we might go up on a pole and drop down a cover, but I mean, maintenance is maintenance. It's part of the game. I think with these things here, with the LED lighting and stuff like that, I think they would look good for several years, and moving forward, I think is the way to go.
Great, thank you, Councillor. So, Madam Clerk, there is a motion on the floor. We will have to reconvene hopefully shortly to allow staff to put this together and firm up the numbers, because I think some of the councillors weren't quite understanding all the numbers. So as long as we can confirm the numbers, if we could at least give direction tonight through a vote to have staff move forward with this, and by at least the middle of next week to contact the clerk's office, who will contact me to set up a quick meeting with Zoom for us so that we can get the finer details of the dollar value. I don't think we can just throw out carte blanche without having an actual figure. I think we need that. So with staff working with the BIA through Councillor Danch, just to firm that number up, just to confirm what it is, confirming that the December ask with the government on the money that they have, we don't want to jeopardize that either in the best path forward. Councillor Clayle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. The reason they wanted to move forward now is because the lights, in order to be up for Christmas, need to be ordered. Actually, it was Friday. Friday was the cutoff date. So if we want to move forward with to get any up for Christmas, we have to order those now. The monies, to my understanding, and maybe the clerk can clarify if I'm wrong, but I think, I'm sure that Nicole had done the numbers on that. Maybe Frank's are a little bit different. I'm not sure where he got his numbers from, but all of the numbers were done by our staff already for a presentation, I thought, at the next council meeting. So I think the numbers are there. They're all ready to go. And if we can move forward on those numbers and order that first piece, and then perhaps have Gary work on the second piece, which is to apply for that grant to get some additional lighting to be used on the east side and on Kalali Street, you know, we can benefit from both. We've got the dollars, like Mr. Boyle said, to be able to do this first piece, and then we can still are eligible for the second piece for the grant, and we can get some additional lighting to have added. But we need to move, time is of the essence, because...
That's fine, Councillor, but all due respect, we do need a dollar value to be...
But I think that Ms. Grigg has it.
Yeah, so based on what Councillor Danch has given us with numbers, it would look that with the BIA's contribution, we would put in $35,400. It was just slightly less than $50,000. I used 50 because, as Councillor Bodner said, there is a cost to put those up. So if you add that to the 43 and change, it basically brings it to 50. So it looks like we're at $35,400 for our contribution. Am I correct on that, Councillor Danch?
I think you're a little high. I mean, if we as a BIA's put in $7,300 each, we're putting in $29,200 over 2 years.
Oh, over 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it is.
We would each BIA would put in $7,300, and then so 14,600 each, 29,200, and then the city would help out.
It's about 21,000.
Yeah, and then hopefully that grant kicks in for 15.
Yeah, based on staff telling me it basically is $50,000 all in on this portion. So that leaves with what you guys are putting in over 2 years, a $20,800 contribution by the city.
With 29,200
is what you guys are putting in. Correct? You're saying the BIA's contribution over a 2 year span is $29,200.
So $7,300 per BIA, It's $29,200 that we would put in,
Yeah.
$7,300 each year. I know Angie's shaking her fist, so I just want to see what she's got to say.
No. So if you subtract that from the 50,000, it's $20,800 would be the city's contribution. Now, if you're going to purchase over and above that, there could be a further ask to you guys if you're going to match if it's a 50-50 grant, and if they say yes to the grant on additional lighting and what that cost is. Is that an additional amount the BIAs are going to be putting in?
The quote was 43,000. So you put another $7,000 on this. And I know there's installation and stuff like that, but I say the quote was for 43,000.
Is that including tax?
Yes.
Councillor?
I'm just gonna flip up and I'm gonna take a look.
Councillor Demery, you had a comment while we're waiting for Councillor Danch?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The quote I saw was for $49,494, and for 40 lights, the BIA in total is willing to put in $20,000. That's all together, and that was sent in the email. So that's why I'm saying we need to get all of these numbers straight, sorted out. I don't want to rush through this decision tonight. I'd like to have that stuff in front of me, and if we need a quick emergency meeting to sort it out, then let's do that. Because we can't just start approving things without having absolutes in front of us.
You're 100% right, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Danch, if you order these like Wednesday or Thursday, is that going to be a huge issue for having them rush it to?
No, I don't think it would. The quote is for 43,800 plus tax. That's what the piece of paper that I read says. And Angie's going,
50,
where am I going here?
It's 50,000. 49,494.
Yeah.
So,
that's it.
okay. So if we can move forward with this without a dollar value, because I know some councillors are not comfortable with it, that's fine. We can allow staff in the next day or two to put this together, so I can call a meeting either Wednesday, hopefully Wednesday, with a Zoom meeting. We'll try to get the best time for all of us. Then we can pass the dollar value at that time. But if we can give direction to staff to move forward, at least it gets the ball rolling. So we all know the actual dollar value. Madam Clerk?
Brian Bowles may know the exact dollar amount.
Okay.
You might be able to pass a motion tonight if you wish to do an upward limit.
Okay,
you might be
Mr.
able
Bowles?
to comment on that.
Yeah, to you, through the mayor, to the rest of council, a mechanism that might, something to consider to expedite the process is if council was in favor of moving forward, you could set an upset limit at this stage, and we'd move forward with that limit. If the numbers prove to be correct, which I believe they are, that the Councillor Danch has put forward, then you would all be well served, and you can move forward with the project. Alternatively, if there is an issue, we'd go forward and establish that secondary meeting.
Okay. And what is that dollar value that we can use tonight, that up limit?
So by my calculations, if the BIAs are each putting in roughly 14.6, you get to the 29. 29 minus 50 is 21,000. I might suggest to council you set an upset limit of 22 to 25,000 just to allow for taxes. And if we can provide that, get that done in that cost, we'll move forward.
Council, is that fine? We can put that with direction from staff online. Is everybody okay with that? 22 to 25,000. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So where does the grant come in? This is not taking into account that grant that we may apply for?
I wouldn't think so, because once you've paid for something, my understanding is grants probably don't. But I know they're, in what I read that we all did receive last week, at the end of the week, was the fact that there is an expansion that they want to do on it. I think that's what they're trying to get in under the grant.
Okay, just so we understand, the grant isn't going to be taken off of the whatever we're doing here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. clear as mud for everybody? So we have a motion on the floor. It's Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Clayliff, that we support the Humberston and downtown BIAs with regards to year-round lighting, with an uptick limit between 22, or I'll say 25,000, and that staff work with the BIAs and also the granting program and come back to council if anything further is needed in the short term, that we may call another meeting, again in the short term, or just proceed with this and then deal with the BIAs on the granting portion if they want to expand the lighting program. Is that clear for everybody? Guys in here, guys online, is that clear? Okay, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, everyone raise their hand if you're in favor, please. Opposed? That's carried. Okay. All right, Councillor Danch, any more? No, I guess we'll take our opportunity when we can. Seeing nothing further, Councillor Beauregard.
I have nothing to discuss.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do apologize for everybody for a long list, but I've had just a little bit of a disorganized week, so didn't get a chance to make the calls to all the staff. But first, let me just say that one staff member in particular was really representing Port Colborne well. Last week, I had the opportunity to attend the Niagara Leadership Summit for Women, and there was a panel discussion on the rising challenge of the online world, which was led by our own Kelly Peterson and done very, very well. She was the moderator and represented us all very well. So I just want to say thank you to her for doing that. Item 2 that I have has to do with Mitchell Street and trucks. Trucks seem to be a theme tonight. There really are issues around the east side with trucks being off truck route a lot. But in this case, there was almost an accident on Mitchell Street with a very large transport that was totally loaded, coming down and not being able to stop quick enough. It is, there's a lot of kids on those streets. It's a dangerous area, and there's really no reason for any truck to be found on Mitchell Street between Fraser and Bell Street. There's just no reason. That's not a route to anywhere. So it doesn't make sense that they should be there, but they were. And the local resident that almost had the accident called the trucking company to complain, and they basically told her she was lying. The truck wasn't there.
Okay.
So,
is that south of Durham?
No, it's north of Durham.
North of Durham? Okay, so it's...
Yeah, between Fraser and Bell.
Okay, all right.
And it was Manitoulin Transport, just so you know,
Yeah.
fully loaded. So she was very, very upset and called me right away. Not the first of the calls that I've received on these issues, and I brought this to council before. I don't know what we can do, but truck route signs would probably, having more truck route signs around would probably make a bit of a difference. But I think it really has to do with the companies that are receiving the deliveries or doing the pickups. They need to be the ones who have some responsibility in this. So possibly we could reach out to local companies and let them know that this can't be happening. They need to talk to their suppliers and make sure that their various trucks that are routed properly. Because there is going to be an accident. It's not the way to be. And our roads really are not built to take the weight of these things coming down quite a lot. I mean, fully loaded transports can carry a lot.
Okay, Councillor, so on that one, I'm going to ask Mrs. Hanson to expand her campaign with regards to businesses to deal with, and primarily in that area would be the 2 lumber yards, Vale, and Allied Marine, I would think, are probably not Allied, I would think, because most of those guys should be coming down Welland, but we'll have those major ones. We'll tell them all just to re-clarify with their companies to be careful where you're going. So
that would be very helpful. We have to do something because it is definitely a dangerous situation.
So, Mrs. Hanson, you're fine with that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, and unless the truck is providing a service or making delivery on that particular street, they're allowed to be there. Other than that, they can't cut through those side streets.
Okay. Well, I can guarantee you they weren't making a delivery or doing a service on that street. So
Thank you, Councillor.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so my third item has to do with construction at the corner of Lincoln and Christmas Street. There were some cuts in the road to building a new house. Obviously, the servicing required some cuts in the road, and the cuts were resurfaced. And there are 3 cuts in total, but the first one that you would find driving east on Christmas Street, that cut, the resurfacing of that wasn't done properly, so it's quite a bump. And the residents there have asked me to see if we can get staff to come out and just resurface that piece. It all looks like temporary patches, but that one is really not a good one.
Mr. Shapowski?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Desmarais. We actually do have that on our list right now. So there's base asphalt down, but it is planned to be restored. Our asphalt patching company is actually having some issues with the rain that we've been having. So we've just been postponed for now, but it is planned to be completed as soon as possible.
Thank you. Okay. I'll let the resident know about that one. My fourth item has to do with school zones. And again, people speeding. This is Janet Street in particular. When the construction happened on Janet Street, the school zone signs were taken down and they were never put back up again. The residents are feeling that those signs going back up might make a difference. Now, reportedly, it's students that are doing the racing that are attending the school. So it's not just people driving through the area, but just maybe we could do something about putting those signs back up. Okay.
Also,
and
Councillor, on that, I will let the staff sergeant know there is an issue in that area right now.
Excellent. Thank you. My last item has to do with the Social Determinants of Health Committee, and I was going to be talking about the homelessness and the resurgence of people sleeping rough, and some of the issues that are surfacing now, and especially with the colder weather coming, we're going to see a lot of challenges coming up. It is time that the committee needs to start meeting again or have some form of communication. And I don't know how the city could arrange this or if we're intending to. I know that other committees are not meeting, but this one kind of serves a different purpose. And I do believe that we could benefit from meeting. So possibly I could leave that with the clerk and see what could happen from it.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, I'll talk to the staff coordinator about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And that's everything. Thank you very much.
Great, Councillor. That's everybody. Thank you, Council. Now on to items requiring separate discussion. We have item number 1, which is actually a public meeting also attached to this. Engineering and Operations Department Engineering Division Report 2020-146. Subject Michener Municipal Drain Meeting to consider. So at this time we have Alana Vanderveen, our drainage superintendent. She will provide a verbal presentation and then introduce Paul Marsh, PEng from EWA Engineering Inc., who will provide a presentation and answer questions from council. We did receive 3 written submissions pertaining to Engineering and Operations Report number 2020-146, subject Michener Municipal Drain Meeting to consider. These have been received by the clerk's office and were distributed to council prior to tonight's meeting. Ms. Vanderveen, you want to take over?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you and to council and the affected members of the Michener Municipal Drain Watershed. Tonight I'll be introducing Paul Marsh of EWA Engineering to present the prepared report for the Michener Municipal Drain. Through the requirements of the Drainage Act, this is an official step known as the meeting to consider, which is the start of the public process. This step is to ensure the report is complete and free of errors. Typically, the members of the watershed would be provided an opportunity to ask any questions. However, due to the changes of public meeting forced upon us by COVID-19 virus, the option to submit any concerns prior to this meeting was described in the mailing sent to all members of the watershed. Additionally, following these steps, should council agree to move the report forward to the Court of Revision, a panel of 3 representatives must be chosen. It is not a requirement that the panel members be members of council, but those members selected must be eligible to run for council. The Court of Revision is a forum where property owners have the opportunity to appeal their assessment should they feel they have just reason to do so. To provide a bit of background prior to Mr. Marsh's presentation, there have been numerous meetings, some with the entire watershed and some with certain areas of the watershed, specifically the proposed branch of Branch Drain 1. The purpose of the branch was initiated through the signing of a petition. These petitions were signed by the Road Authority to give status to the existing watercourses that currently cross private property. Passing collected water from a road allowance onto private property is not a neighborly thing to do, and as the city, it is in our best interest to work with affected neighbors to ensure flooding is not created as a result of our negligence. There were concerns from the residents within the Lakeshore Road East and Lorraine Road area that were addressed through the findings of this report. And since the mailing for this report, for this meeting, I have spoken individually with 3 of the 4 residents, and all have expressed their satisfaction. So to this, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Marsh so he can do a better presentation than what I have.
Thank you, Ms. Van der Veen. Mr. Marsh, welcome.
Thank you. I'm still working okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to move to share my screen before I start.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alana, members of council and city staff and members of the public that are attending tonight. This is my first time doing this kind of a presentation rather than being present at the meeting. I hope it goes well. The Michener Drain, Alana and I have been working on for quite some time. It started before me back in 2001 with the appointment of Weeb Engineering Group. Weeb Engineering ceased operations and handed the work back to the city of Port Colborne. They appointed AMEC Environment and Infrastructure in 2011 to carry out the report. They turned it back to the municipality again, saying that they no longer had a drainage engineer in their employ. And I was appointed through council 2018 and have been working on it ever since. The report was concluded earlier this year, but was delayed coming to council through COVID. Our agenda tonight is talk about the engineering approach that we took, some of the process that we went through, talk about the drain work costs and what exactly is in, talk about how allowances are set up under the Drainage Act, and then look at a couple of points in the drainage assessment schedule before I'll open it up for questions. In this, as a drainage engineer, it's a practice in Ontario that has been around for a long, long time, but really it's a practice that's undergoing a change. The picture you see on the left is really a traditional view of how drainage would look like, and it's not really in favor very much anymore. We're really looking at using the Drainage Act to manage water courses in a more holistic way and not just see it as a clean channel with no obstructions in it, but to see it as a natural water course that we're managing to the benefit of all constituents. Within that, we often deal with trees. Trees and drains are kind of a thing. It's a thing because we stick to using machines for the maintenance of the drain channel, and trees make using the machines difficult. There's not really a way today to manually manage drains. Machines are the way it works. We really see trees as really important within the municipality. I want to draw on this picture. There's good trees in the green circle, which are large, well-established trees with a healthy crown. And the trees in the red circle are really a stand of ash trees that have grown up in the middle of the drain, and they're not in good shape. And as they die and drop branches into the drain, these become the potential to cause obstructions. And it's exactly why the Drainage Act stipulates maintenance. This is a view of what the Michener looks like that was prepared during our baseline report, where we do basic assessments of what the grade looks like. And we do a submission for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans benefit, which shows the drain so that they can figure out whether there's a fisheries issue in the drain that we have to deal with or not. And you can see the pictures that are included with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans map that we provide, showing the drain as it appears at the very bottom and the drain as it appears at the very top. I'm going to talk briefly about those three images. The outlet is roughly about 4 meters across the top, and the bottom is a little bit more than a meter. In the upper part of the watershed, in the portion that is still agricultural, this is what the drain looks like. It's still about 4 or 5 meters in top width, but you can see the bottom has expanded out to almost that full width. And it does have quite a lot of growth of trees within it. This is and then the image on the very far left, this is just downstream of the Friendship Trail. And you can see the top width in this section is about 16 meters. And this is exactly the opposite of how we would expect a normal water course to proceed. We would expect it to be narrow at the very beginning and wide at the mouth where it's outletting. And in this case, it's the reverse of that. And part of the challenge of that is some of the grade, and part of it is the available land and how low it is relative to the drain. This is what the Google view of it looks like in a perspective sort of way. I'm just going to draw a couple of points here, is that you can see the golf course, which inhabits the middle portion of the drain. And you can see from here up is the drain itself, and how there's a considerable amount of vegetation that's established along it. Originally with AMEC Foster Wheeler, there was a water quality assessment report prepared, and they identified areas throughout Wignall, the Michener, and the Beaver Dam of environmental impact measures that could be made to improve it. This included planting buffers along the channels, creation of wetlands and fallow areas, modification of the drain channels, and using wetlands for runoff storage during high events. They identified about $5 million worth of work that would happen with this report, but it was never allocated within the assessments for it to go forward. These are some of the images of the drain. The image on the left is showing you some of the environmental impacts within the drain itself. The green are designated wetlands by the province, along with the 30-meter buffer shown in the dotted lines. The yellow areas with the orange dashed line is the regulated floodplain by Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. And so any cut and fill within that on property has to be reviewed with the Conservation Authority. And in fact, we had a discussion with them during our design process period about whether environmental assessments were required or what exactly they would want from us. They really just want a recognition that this is a largely maintenance exercise and that there's very little construction to go on. So they didn't actually require anything of us. This shows on the right the 3 major catchments that are laid out. As part of the petition, branch number 1 at the bottom has 2 outlets to pick up, one on Lorraine and the other on Lakeshore East. And there is an existing channel that's been there since 1934. So the work would be to recognize it as a municipal drain. The municipal drain itself has existed from Lakeshore Road all the way up to the Friendship Trail. It's had other pieces and portions above the Friendship Trail historically, but we're only going to recognize it in this report as starting and ending at the Friendship Trail on the north side. I got to point out these orange blobs are crossings or culverts. You can see that there isn't one in the first farm north of the golf course. There is one in the next farm. There is one in the next farm, and there is one in the next farm. And then there is one at the Friendship Trail crossing. There are 2 culverts on Lorraine Road that will allow the Friendship Trail to drain east to west. And there were discussions when this project was with AMEC about making the Friendship Trail part of the drain. And through discussions with Alana, we agreed that this would be better left as roadside swales that are maintained by the city of Port Colborne, rather than putting them into a part of the drain, because they're along properties that are owned by the city of Port Colborne, and they can function exactly as a roadside swale does, which exists along Lorraine Road. This is really the primary design deliverable that exists in the report, and I'm going to draw a couple of highlight points for your consideration. The red crosses that you see are where I, as an engineer, am putting in control points to guide the grade line, and it's the new proposed grade line. And you can see in the background what's marked out as RVA 1977, and I'm sure it's very, very small text on everyone's screen, is the original grade line that we converted from the 1979 report. It was in feet. And so when we do the conversion, I can't be exactly positive of where it was originally. We've done the best that we can to put it on this map. However, this map does have pieces of it that are tied down with survey. And one of those that's important to note is this one up here, the culvert. And so we're anchoring part of the new grade line based on survey information about that specific culvert. So the first feature I want to draw your attention to is that we're identifying sediment basins as part of the drain construction. And the purpose of these is to improve water quality, specifically targeted upstream or downstream of the agriculture lands and downstream of the golf course. The work in 1979 actually identified a sediment basin to be installed as part of that work. The second one is that this agriculture crossing that was asked for as part of the farm that's immediately north of the golf course is identified as a flow control crossing. So the culvert that's upstream of this is actually a 900, and the culvert that's at this location is a 600. It's done that way specifically to hold back larger period storms. So the normal everyday storm will still pass through the 600 culvert, but storms of higher flow volumes will be backed up in the agricultural lands and held back for a period of time and not just whistle down through to the Wignall outlet. And the third part is this existing culvert is kept in place, and we're really just looking to control grade through it. So I have to point out to you that the grade below that to the golf course is 0.08%, which even for Port Colborne standards is a low grade culvert. Above that, we get a nice 0.17%, which is better, but considered, acceptable in terms of grades. And then we have an existing culvert up there at the farm that's going to be improved with the replacement project. Right now, the outlets to it are obstructed. So there's 2 branch drains. Lana's already talked about the fact that these are petition 4 drains by the city at their request. And it's to recognize that what is already there as a channel or a water course is to be made a municipal drain so that the municipality can go in and maintain it on a regular basis. and not have any obstructions or problems that block it from functioning. This is what branch drain number 2 looks like, and this is a piece of the drawing that's showing it. If you look at again, the design points in the red cross, they're almost right on the surveyed grade line that we found that was out there. So we're not going out there to remove and excavate a whole bunch of material. We're really doing a clean and clear and verify that the grade doesn't have any humps in it to the bottom of the pond and no further. This will involve some vegetation removal in order to allow the machine to get in there, but it's largely a brushing exercise. We're not doing anything within the confines of the pond. We're not touching the pond in any way. Above the pond again to this bend where it turns to the east again, there is more cleanup in there with overgrown vegetation. Commencing right at this bend and through out to the road, the existing water channel is confined on both sides by a row of trees. And we're not doing anything within that row of trees. We're keeping them exactly as is, except for one tree that's right at this point where the X's are indicating the survey took place, where a tree toppled over and the roots have kind of messed up the drain channel in there. So we really just need to do a little bit of spot maintenance in there to ensure that the drain channel is okay and the fallen tree gets cleaned up. Branch drain number 1 was the really fun part of the project. And it again is to see that there is sufficient outlet for 2 culverts, one on Lorraine Road here and one on Lakeshore Road East. And so there was about 5 design options considered on how to do that. The first one I came up with, and we discussed it on site. It was to just head straight across Mr. Winger's property to gain an outlet to the existing channel that already makes a connection to the Michener. The property owner wasn't in favor of that and had some other issues. The existing channel does proceed north through here from this area. And so that owner asked that it all be covered in a closed conduit. That was option number 2. When we brought that forward, it was considered too expensive by these 2 gentlemen in particular. And they were asked for us to look at going straight to the Wignall along this road. And in fact, the geography just doesn't permit that in here. It's going against the grade that's on that road. And the next drawing, you'll see that. We had several meetings with this, and a couple of councillors participated, and we've made quite a bit of effort to reach a consensus on how this should look. And the way it looks is that there's a tile drain that brings this flow down and crosses the road to another tile drain that crosses along Rake Shore. And then there's an open channel with a tile drain in the bottom of it that outlets to a catch basin back here, with an open channel that makes a connection to the main branch over here. That is really what's made everybody happy about it. And the part that makes me nervous about it is that as part of this discussion, it was recognized that there's Onondaga Formation rock just below the surface. We don't know exactly how far down in here, but I'm hoping that we're not going to run into rock as part of our tile excavation in here. But without doing an extensive geotechnical investigation to find that out, we're going to find out in construction. This is really what that looks like. If anybody's been out there, this is where the drain, where the proposed drain stops, which is right in front of, and I can't remember the gentleman's house, but there's a surveyed low spot in their front lawn here that's shown as 175.86, and that's what we're trying to pick up. This invert is the tile that's outletting back, and this is the lower tile that's underneath the existing open channel that's making an outlet to a catch basin. This is the existing drain that was replaced by the city 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. and has been the source of some consternation between upstream neighbors and downstream neighbors. If you look here at the surface that was surveyed by Alana, you can see that going that way to get an outlet with a drain that would be graded positively would create a really big open ditch by the time you got to the Wignall. So we did look at that, and it just wasn't physically going to work without digging up a whole bunch of people's front yards. So in the end, you can see there's about, you can see we've shown here where the lake typically has been the last little while at 174.15 is not that far from where we're proposing to do this work. It is below this work, and so at least there is positive drainage most of the time, but during a sesh or a surge event, that's why we have the gates, in order to close them and try to stop that water from coming back up in here. So under Drainage Act allowances, this is one of the areas where the Drainage Act is not prescriptive, and it's up to the drainage engineer to make choices in how they structure the report. And I have made some specific choices. Number one is that the Section 29 acquisition of land uses a consistent land value for every single piece that's purchased. Some other engineers go by the impact valuations. I've chosen to just use a price of agricultural land in Niagara set at a rough $10,000 per acre. Everybody gets the same valuation regardless of their land. Agricultural land is considered our purchase benchmark. The other one is Section 33 damages. We're making a payment for Section 30 damages where the tracks of our excavator are going to damage a commercial crop. So basically row crop or vegetable crops, anything where it's going to harm a person's income in a given year where we're doing construction work. But we're not making payments for trees, ornamental trees, grass or gardens, or fences, or anything else that we can fix and put back to a like or better condition. And that's the key word, is that we're not paying someone because we're tearing up their grass. We're paying people where we affect their living and their income. On trees, it's important for us that we support trees in there, and trees that are not within the top of banks of the drain, but are in the way of our machinery, are eligible for a replacement program with saplings at a 2-to-1 ratio. So if we take a tree out and a person wants to keep the canopy of trees on their property, we give them 2 trees back for the 1 tree that we have to take out. There's criteria that has to be met with that. So it has to be a certain size tree to qualify. Not every little tree that's there will qualify. And the last one is Section 31, where there's an existing channel that's been paid for by someone else. Even if it was the farmer originally from 60 years ago, the current owner is recognized that exists on their property with the payment for the value if it was constructed in today's dollars. So in branch number 1 and branch number 2, we are making these payments. The other sections for allowance we don't have in this, which is insufficient outlet or 33, loss of access. So the Section 30 allowances are again targeted at commercial landowners that have row crops that we could damage by traversing it. You can see what it's 10 meters from the top of the channel. And again, it's based on $10,000 per agricultural value, but in a 10-year cycle of annualized agricultural revenue. In this, we will need to dump spoils adjacent to the drain, and there's a new act promulgated last year that is excess soils, and in it the requirements for what to do with spoils are changing, and the concept of contaminated soils being moved off-site will have always required a registry, but now they're looking at a registry for any soils that are moved off-site. This was to come in effect July of this year, and the government is looking at deferring it until a later date when there's a less COVID impacts during its implementation. But it is one of the reasons that for the drains, we look to just keep a spoil bank adjacent to it and not have to move soils on or off this. So in this case, we're not moving soils on or off. There is language in our specifications that if the owner wishes that to happen, it can be done, but at their expense. A couple of points on the assessments. The total estimate of the cost is $199,000. Of that, construction makes up just under $100,000, $94,000. Admin is my engineering fee plus all previous engineering fees plus lawyers or any of the other stuff that goes with a contract to be let, to the tune of about $88,000, and we have structured $17,000 in allowances. Allowances are money that's collected from one owner in the watershed and allocated to the project to other owners in the watershed. There's a special benefit that's identified in the assessment, and it's in the Michener through the golf course. The original plan showed a sediment trap in 1979. There's no evidence that it exists now. I don't know whether it was ever really constructed. And in this, I've assigned that cost all to Lou. I'm sorry, I forgot his last name, but Lou of the golf course.
Lou Newland.
It's really meant to be a payment in kind. I'm expecting in this that he will be interested to do the work because he uses the drain to fill his reservoirs. And this sediment trap is going to be a facility that benefits him more than just trapping sediment. But I'm intending to work with him in order to see that accomplished. It's shown in the drawings, and I would like him to contribute the labor part of constructing it on his land so that he can use it for his own purposes, and it won't cause a problem to other users of the drain. There is a contribution by the city in order for that to happen of a couple of material items. And with that, I'll open it up for questions or invite Alana if she thinks I forgot something that I was supposed to say to catch me up and straighten me out.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Marsh. Lana, do you have anything to add or just go straight to questions?
You can go straight to questions. I believe that was a pretty thorough explanation.
Okay, great. I had Councillor Wells and Councillor Baggy move this. Councillor Wells, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Paul. With regards to the connection between the Michener and the Wignell drain, there are some concerns regarding the Wignell drain being able to accept the flows of water from a reconstituted Michener drain, as there are problems already being experienced at the discharge point of the Wignell and flooding causing backing up that way. Is this work going to be done before there's any correctional work on the Wignell, or is that done in concert?
Alana?
Well, yeah, if I can respond to that through you, Mr. Mayor. The Wignell is a challenge. Ever since the E.J. Clark report in, I think it was the 70s, 69 maybe, there's no grade in the Wignell from the gates all the way back to the Friendship Trail. It's shown on the plans to be zero. And so there's not a lot of options for making that faster. And that's partly why we're introducing this flow holdback technique here at this midpoint in the Michener, so that as we clean this up and we make it flow better for the low flow periods, is that when it does flow high and hard, is that there's going to be a detention function that occurs with this. Now, there's no guarantee that that is going to actually solve the problem on the Wignall, because the problem with the Wignall is bigger than what that little technique is going to solve.
Councillor?
So I'm sorry there, Councillor. I'm not really giving you a positive answer on that, but solving the Wignall is a pretty tough problem.
And that is the concern that was raised in regards to some of the property owners on the Michener, that they will not experience any benefit by the cleaning or the work being done on the Michener. In fact, they may experience a negative impact upon their properties. And this is why they are objecting to some of the work that we're proposing.
Well, the intention of performing maintenance on the Michener can proceed whether my report gets heard or not, because the Michener main part of it is a municipal drain and has been for a long time. So that can go ahead, and it doesn't require anybody's participation except Atlantis. The issue is that if it does, without these features that we've added in to mitigate some of those impacts, then there is a risk that it will make something worse. But realistically, this argument that the drain should stay bad as a protective measure in order to not have flooding anywhere else in the system, it's not really how we're looking to do management of the existing system. I get the argument, but when we look at where this vegetation is doing this, it's really holding back low flows that's impacting the function of the drain. When there's flooding, it spreads out all through here. That's kind of what the one map from the NPCA shows. This whole area is a flood zone. And so I fully appreciate the concerns of the residents that live in the low reaches of this and the Wignall, because there's not a lot of margin between what's expected as the high flow event and their properties.
Thanks, Paul. Just one other question or advice maybe to any of the local residents on what would the next steps be for them to seek any adjustments or assessments in regards to their contributions to this work.
Paul?
So as part of, and Alana will maybe correct me on this, but as part of this process, we've already received some submissions that Alana and I will prepare a written response to. And if there's anyone else who wants to challenge that, we will prepare a response as well. And so if anyone feels that there's a technical reason or any reason that needs to be addressed as part of the report, they can make that submission to us. I believe there's a period that will end by which that can happen. And that period would start now with this report. That's what Alana said earlier. You want to just confirm that for me, Alana?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Alana, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. To my knowledge, since the appointment of Weeb Engineering back in 2001, the Michener drain has not been maintained. In saying that, through part of the pictures that Mr. Marsh had shown, there are trees that are down, that if those trees are removed, the capacity that is now in the drain for water rather than debris and buildup, a well-maintained drain is much better than a dilapidated drain. yes, there is that concern that water is going to sail through there faster, which Mr. Marsh has addressed. But there's also the ability to store water. When the drain is full of debris and branches and fallen trees and whatnot, the water can't be there, so it's going to sit everywhere else. So more or less, as Mr. Marsh has mentioned, the main section of the Michener drain, or the existing drain, is basically just a maintenance to be able to allow the drainage that was designed a number of years ago. Yes, we are helping with that by creating a slightly different grade line, but it's more or less just to keep that continued structure, continued system well established.
Okay, thank you. Further questions online? Councillor Bodnar, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Through you to Paul. Paul, there's a couple of people that have copied both Harry and I and have mentioned wetlands that they would either that they have on their property, or in one case, I believe that they are working on developing on their property. Have you worked with them as you're doing this drain? Can this be an advantage to the rest of the people in the drain if there's a wetland to store some of this water?
Mr. Marsh?
As a response to Mr. Bodnar, it's a great question, and it's something that Alana and I have been working on with the Port Colborne drain, because as part of that construction 2 years ago, there were wetlands and ponds created on individuals' property with the MPCA. Now, not every pond is created equal. And so when we look at wetlands or ponds, we look at the contribution that the volume of that pond makes to the conveyance of total water that's trying to pass through there. And yes, there is definitely a benefit that we and the watershed gets when people do things on their property that slows the water down. And so we want to recognize those good stewardship activities. And it's the same kind of thing if a farmer was willing to set aside land as a buffer between the farm or the row crops and the drain. It's a benefit to everybody in the watershed. And so we're looking for a way to recognize that shared benefit with those individual property owners. We're still trying to iron out the technical parts of that, along with the Drainage Act parts of that. So yes, we're definitely in favor of wetlands and ponds. And the challenge, I think, for us is that that benefit that we recognize in the drain needs to be conveyed to the next owner as an ongoing obligation. Because if the next owner comes in and doesn't like the wetland and puts in tile drain, then we've got to make a change to recognize that change in land use. And so yes, we do want to support that initiative to go forward. And Alana and I have been working on the details of how to make that happen. We weren't aware of any in the Michener that fell under that case. So those specific technical parts aren't in this report. We're working on them to put them in the Port Colborne report.
Okay, so if there was, I was under the understanding that at least one agricultural farm was in the process of doing some wetlands. So I will contact them, make sure they contact you, and maybe there's something missing in it, but I'll speak further to that too. Just to pick up on Harry's point of what is the next steps here, can you tell us, or Alana tell us, to my knowledge, there's 3 points that are options for people as it goes along the chain before it gets to the end of the final drainage thing. Can you tell us what those three? I know the first one will be quarter revision, where people can go and ask or bring up technical things they think is wrong. What are the next two?
Alana?
For you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Bodnar. So the first step is the quarter revision. That will be where a panel is put together. Those panel members listen to any concerns that people would have about their assessment. After the assessments are dealt with, and then if people are still not satisfied, they have the process to go through a drainage tribunal. Through the drainage tribunal, panel is put together through OMAFRA, and then they listen to any concerns that those members may have. The tribunal can make changes to the report rather than just the assessments. They're also able to adjust the report. So, is the report finalized? Ideally, we'd love to say yes. But through the process of appeals and the Drainage Act, no, it's never truly finished until it's built. Even saying that, changes can still happen. Through that avenue, the third process is the referee, which I've not had a great deal of experience with the referee, and truthfully, I hope never to have experience with the referee. I hope that our appeals never get to that point. But I know that there is that third process of appeal should people still not be pleased with the quarter revision or the tribunal.
Okay, thank you. And one further question to Paul, I think. Paul, you had mentioned some changes to the Drainage Act, and one you mentioned was the spoils taking out of the drain, and could they be contaminated, and they'd like them to remain on site. If somebody does not wish to have those spoils, they will be taken away, but that property owner will pay to have those taken away and put in the right spot. I received correspondence from one of the people, and you may have too in this drain, that said they do not want the spoils put on their property. Have you talked to them about a possible dollar value? Because we all know that first let's go, will those spoils have to be tested before they leave that property? And if so, that could be a lot of dollars if it has to go to Walker's, or I don't know where it would go, but someplace other than, say, a landfill. Are they aware that that this could be some substantial money to get rid of those spoils?
Mr. Marsh?
So I'm going to respond as a two-part response. The first part is that the Drainage Act hasn't changed in that respect. The Drainage Act identifies that spoils can be left adjacent to the drain, and that a compensation payment to the landowner in recognition of those spoils can be made. Where spoils are trucked away, it's seen as a benefit that's attached to the individual landowner. And so that cost is typically borne by the landowner who benefits. And they pay the trucking rate, not the cost to remove it, but just the trucking rate to move the soil from their place to an identified receiver. Now, in the Environmental Act and the Excavation Act, the Excavation Act is brand new. I have never done a drain yet that falls under the Excavation Act, because it was only promulgated, I think, last year, and it is yet to fully take effect. And so I don't really know how that's going to be determined. But I do know that once you sample the spoils and you know that it is contaminated, then you are on a totally different track about how to dispose of those contaminated soils. And so once we do have an owner that wants to truck them away, I feel that we'll be required to conduct a sampling program just to confirm they are not contaminated. If they're not, there's still issues we're going to have to address with the new Excavation Act and excess soils. And if it is contaminated, then yeah, there's a whole program in there, and the disposal, it would be borne by the owner and not something that the city's looking to cover on anybody's behalf. So yeah, I think there's some red flags that go up when we start talking about those kinds of things.
Okay, that's it for now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors online wish any questions? Okay, seeing none. Anybody here? Seeing none. Thank you, Alana and Mr. Marsh. Appreciate it. Great presentation. So with
Thank
that,
you for your time.
with that, we do need to pick 3 councillors or 4 because we need a alternate. So far, I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu putting their names forward for the Court of Revision. Any other councillor wish to put their name forward? Councillor Bodner, I see your hand up. Councillor Bodner. So we have our 3. Is there an alternate? Councillor Danch, an alternate? Okay, and Councillor Danch is the alternate. I was the alternate last time and I was called because one of the other guys couldn't make it. So, and then the person didn't show up. Okay. Yeah, Harry was the chair of that one. Okay, so we have that. So we have this motion duly moved by the councillors. Seeing no further questions, we have our 4 people on the Court of Revision. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Item number 2, I do note that there are 2 conflicts. Councillor Bagu and Councillor Beauregard on this one. Planning and Development Department Bylaw Enforcement Division Report number 2020-106, subject fence variance, 128 McCain Street. Councillor Wells moving, Councillor Bruno seconding that. Questions? Councillor Wells?
I did have some questions, but in the correspondence that was received from both the property owner with the fence and their neighbor, it seems like there may be some options that are here and available to us that I think we should explore, that we could come up with a mutual agreement with bylaws involvement.
Okay. Councillor Beauregard, did you have a conflict on this one?
No, Your Worship. I was raising my hand to let you know that.
Sorry, I apologize. I do have you written for number 6. For some reason, I had you written for that one also.
I understand I have conflicts on many items, so I can see.
I was kind of wondering why you had one there, but it was Councillor Bagu.
Bagu, correct, yes.
Any other questions? Councillor Bruno, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I've been with the same mind after our last meeting of Councillor Wells, and I know Councillor Califf asked to see if there could be some accommodation. In reading both submissions by the 2 neighbors, I concur they look like they're a lot closer together than I thought they even might be before reading their letters. I did attend at the McPherson household, and there were talks of cutting back the fence, taking out some hedges, and as far as the Maud letter, Mr. and Mrs. Maud, there's nothing in their letter that I haven't heard, and it's what I heard from the first time out. The last meeting talked about how we could get closer together. My only concern was answered in that the McPhersons were going to do the cutout to 3 feet above surface, which I had said to me seemed to be a holy grail that needed to be upheld, which is the cutout height that's necessary. When I read both their letters, and I'll wait to hear from other councilors and Councilor Wells, it seems to me that we might be down to just how many of the plantings might have to come. And so if we're that close, I'm encouraged that we might have something here, but I'll beg off to hear from other councilors as well, if you're gonna come back around.
Yep, I can come back. And I just want to let councilors know that we do have Rachel McPherson on the call here. So, councilors online, any questions? I don't see any there. Oh, Councilor Bodnar, yes?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether anybody else is getting, but there's a lot of interference, like somebody's crumpling paper or something, and it's getting increasingly hard to hear. So just wondered, the techies out there can make that go away? Thanks.
Well, before we move forward, we'll just ask our fellow that.
There it goes again right now.
I hear it as well.
Yeah, all you guys are muted. Rachel's muted. Other staff's muted. I do turn my pages, but they're not making any noise. Somebody into their Halloween candy early and crumpling the wrapper from it. So, okay, well, yeah, well, we're having our tech keep an ear out for that. Okay. Did you have a question?
It hasn't stopped, Your Worship.
It's still going?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't hear anything at our end.
It's quite often when you're talking, Mr. Mayor. Just saying.
Yeah. So you're saying our YouTube isn't, it's clear on YouTube? So it's all you guys. YouTube's fine. Our tech is fine. Okay. Well, it might be you, Councillor Bodnar.
I took the cat out of the paper bag, so that might help.
Okay. So those to the proponent or to staff on this? Okay, I'm going to go back to Councillor Wells on this one. Councillor Wells?
Through you, Your Worship, to Sherry. Sherry, have you reviewed the McPherson's suggestion on modifying the fence? And how close does that bring them into compliance with the current bylaw?
Mrs. Hanson?
As Mr. Bodnar has stated, that it's really difficult to hear with the rustling. So I got how close I am to the bylaw, and I couldn't quite make out the rest of what Councillor Wells was saying.
What I was asking Sherry was if you've reviewed the McPherson proposal to modify their fence, how close do their modifications come to bringing the fence into compliance?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. Currently, the bylaw has a 4.5 meter setback for fences, and the McPherson proposal is at 2 feet, which is a 0.75 meter setback.
That's the setback. Is there any difficulties with their proposal in regards to sight lines or visibilities on the sidewalk or traffic on Steele Street?
Sure.
Their proposal with regards to the height and visibility is all encompassing with the bylaw. And the height that they are proposing hasn't changed. What we're looking at is looking for visibility, which means 50% either vertically or horizontally removing that area. I can only go by what the council has passed by the bylaw, and currently her proposal does not comply with that.
Counselor?
I may be wrong, and maybe Rachel can confirm this, but my understanding is the section of the fence that runs parallel to Still Street will be lowered to 3 feet, as well as the bushes. There will also be a notchback on the fence line that's abutting their neighbor by 2 feet, and that notchback, or the notchback, will actually be triangulated between the parallel side of Steel Street to the abutting property owner. And that notched back section would extend backward on the abutting fence line by 2 feet and be lower to a maximum height of 3 feet. So my understanding on that is that would open up the complete sight line, drop the fence line right down to 3 feet, and actually have a notch in the corner for it to actually go right down to the ground level. I don't know if Rachel can confirm that or not.
I'll go to Ms. McPherson.
The first bit that the councilman just tried to say, I missed most of it because of the interference with the microphone, but basically the corner that meets with the old fence that was originally there and the fence that runs along Steel Street, the corner is the part that we are talking about dropping down to 3 feet, 2 feet in on both sides. So it wouldn't be the complete fence being dropped down, just that corner, and then removing 3 of the cedar trees that are there to also increase visibility. I don't know if that helped clear things up or if that was the question. I'm sorry, I could only hear so much of what was being said.
Councillor?
Thank you. That did clear it up. The fence running parallel to Steel Street would remain at the 6 foot height except for the notched out area.
Yes, she's nodding yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Ms. McPherson. I don't know, Rachel, if you've seen your neighbor's pictures, but certainly there seemed to me the new, first off, I drove by there again today, and one of your statements is something that I hadn't noticed the last time I drove by, and that is, it is true that when your car is legally parked in the driveway, that actually is more than 3 feet high. However, it's not always there, and there's nothing we can do about your driveway or you legally parking a car there. When I look at the picture from the mods and the most recent incident, clearly their larger car, when it shows it being backed out, and of course it depends on the angle of the photograph, but I would say that it's the sort of looking down vertically towards the sidewalk when you have someone in a baby carriage or someone pushing down the road now seems to be more of the issue at hand that could be more corrected by your shrubs that were there. So my question to you is, if 3 had to become 4 or 5 shrubs, is that a problem?
Ms. McPherson?
Sorry, no, that wouldn't be a problem if we needed to take more out. I had offered all of them at the first meeting, but I just 3 sort of was the magic number this time. But if it's 4 or 5, that's fine.
Councillor?
Thank you. I think now we get to one issue, making a decision tonight based on the speculation that that's going to resolve the issue for the mods and we haven't heard from them, or as much as it would normally pain me to do this, for them to either sit down with somebody from the city or them the mods have another look at it with the idea that those shrubs were out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an unresolved issue on a fence that's already built in there now. So I'm not so sure that time is of the essence on this if we're that close. But I think I'd like to hear from Mr. and Mrs. Maud too.
Okay. They're not on this evening,
Oh, I'm sorry.
correct? Yeah, they're not on this evening, so. They did submit their document though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I read that in the pictures, and I think both sides take on the situation. I don't think neither one can be considered to be offside in any ways. That said, I don't know if Eric, who I know was involved with this, or anybody else has a counter proposal. Otherwise, I'm going to ask to speak to Ms. Hanson. Well, actually, why don't I do that now? Through you to Ms. Hanson. Ms. Hanson, I know the distance back from the curb, even with the cutout, even with the new height, renders this still not in compliance with the bylaw, hence the reason for the variance, but brings it a lot closer. Is there an opportunity for you to either meet separately with the parties, or could you reattend at the site to look at the hedge issues for purposes of what Mr. Maud describes and shows in his picture as an issue with the sidewalk now, rather than, and a pedestrian on it, vis-a-vis I think the picture with the stroller or buggy. I just like to see if we can resolve that, because clearly with their car in the driveway, clearly with the cutout, with some hedges removed, I think it resolves, and the mods speak to it, about the issue of the cutout. That being made in some hedges, what I really don't know is if it resolves the issue that's almost immediately below them, and that's the sidewalk. I'm happy with what it does, in my view, and having pulled in there today, with the traffic flow. But clearly, the issue of someone on the sidewalk is new to me as of today in reading this and seeing it.
Ms. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruno, I'd be happy to meet with every and all participants in this issue to try and resolve the issue. As present, we had a complaint. We dealt with the complaint, offered the person, Ms. McPherson, to fill out a variance to resolve the issue through council. Council is the one that sets the bylaw with regards to 4.5 meter setback. That has been approved, and we're just trying to resolve that and see if there's some compromise so we can move forward.
Counselor?
Thank you. I think without the mods having an opportunity to speak to the potential of 2 or 3 more hedges being brought out, I'm uncomfortable about not hearing that comeback, and so I would, barring any other councillors speak, which I'll concede to now, I'll be coming back with that referral.
Great, thank you. Councillor Stanch.
I've visited the property myself, and I've backed in the driveway next door, and I personally don't see a big visual issue there. The sidewalks there are narrow anyways, as far as a walking perspective goes and stuff like that. But personally, Rachel, I think if you're willing to take those few trees out of there, I don't even know why we're discussing this anymore. It's just pointless.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors online? Councillor Borgard.
Through your worship, I think the whole point of this exercise was to come to meet in the middle. I believe the applicants have made quite the amount of concessions here, and I think if we are to do what Councillor Danch says, to just remove all the hedges and then the proposed 2 feet removals plus the 3 feet down, I think that should be sufficient and address the safety concerns.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Hanson, just a point of clarification. From the property line back, I know you gave the meters, but what is it in feet that they'd have to be back? Did you say 4 meters? Take your mute off.
4.5 meters is the required setback for the fence when it's adjacent to a driveway and parallel to a street. You want that calculated into feet, is what you're asking?
It's over 12 feet, so okay. Answers my question. Thank you. Donna, did you have your hand up? Sorry, Councillor Claylough?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. When I was reading through the mods letter today that they sent, it looked as if at one point, something we'd talked about, they said that they had clear vision to look down and see people on the sidewalk when they had 1-inch spaces between the boards. And they talked about being able to see through them. And I think Miss McPherson today is saying they've made it solid, excuse me, and she's not talking particularly about lowering the height of it. So we're still going to have that problem on that corner if it's not lowered. But could they just open it up around that corner so that again, I think they need to talk with the mods if you're going to try to do this, because they're saying their difficulty is just the fact that they can't see down. They're looking at a new vehicle. They're going to have more difficulty from where they're parking from the pictures they drew. But at the same time, they're saying that when they could see through that fence a little bit, it was enough to be able to see both people and cars. I'm not sure, did you read that when you saw it, Councillor Bruno? Like, they talked about, you know, the trees will get larger and they'll you know, their view will be gone anyway. But if they had those spaces, they talked about the fact that for years they were able to manage with that. They could see people both on the sidewalk and they could see cars. And now their concern is, well, most recently was with somebody in a wheelchair going by, a motorized wheelchair, and they weren't able to see it through the fence. But they said if they had the opening between the fence boards, they would have been able to see it.
Councillor Bruno?
I had read that too, but frankly, I think that, now you have the fencing along Steel Street. And because you have the cutout now, and if you remove the trees, I don't know that any spacing between the fence along the property line would serve the purpose it once did. Because you have a fence on Steel Street, so I'm.
But if it's cut out, yes, I see what you're saying. If they cut the corner.
I think with that and listening to my fellow councillors, particularly with Ms. McPherson's opportunity to take out more, take out all of the hedges, it seems to me that downward look, I thought where you were going, which actually put me over the edge here, certainly to be supportive, is that you're right, the issue was not the sidewalk and looking down before.
No, it
and
is.
So I think the accommodation does work, so I'm on board with that.
Perhaps have the mods had a chance to see what Mrs. McPherson's suggesting? Have they seen? Do we know if they've seen what she's suggesting?
Staff, do you know the answer to that question? They haven't?
So perhaps then it is, like we said, they need to get together with Ms. Hanson and look at it.
Okay. Councillor Borgard?
Through your worship to the council, we keep asking whether or not the mods had an opportunity. They've had the same opportunity as Ms. McPherson to come here and say their piece. So they could have just as well have been here to argue the other side or argue whatever it is they wanted. There is an opportunity for them to discuss, and them choosing not to be present at this time is a decision that they made. That's all.
Okay, Councillor. So we do have a motion on the floor, Council. Is there anybody that would like to amend this? Councillor Beauregard?
Through your worship, reading the laws, our bylaw, our procedural bylaw, I can't just amend it to be opposite of what this is. So from my understanding, we have to vote it down and then create a new motion.
We could do that. Is that okay, Madam Clerk? Okay. So I will call the question. You heard what Councillor Beauregard said, and that is true. If you want to make a new motion, we defeat this and put a new motion on the floor. Does everybody understand that? Just so you know. Okay? All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? All opposed? Raise your hand. The motion is defeated. Councillor Beauregard.
Okay. I propose in the new motion that I'd like to move that we make that the applicant is to remove all the shrubs along the fence on Steel Street, and that at the corner side where the two properties are joining closest or abutting and on Steel Street, that the fence be put down to 3 feet in height and 2 feet in width alongside the adjoining properties. I hope that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Can I get a seconder to that? Councillor Bruno? Conversation. Questions on the motion? Councillor Clayliff.
Could I just clarify, Councillor Beauregard, how far back are you talking the 3 foot? Are you talking going right around the corner into the driveway of the neighbor?
So the fence will be lowered 3 feet at the corner. So it'll come down 3 feet and it'll run 2 feet back on the property line along the driveway and the Steel Street fence going north. And the
Is it not that it needs to be 3 feet high, so it's 5 foot, now it's lowered 2 feet to give you the 3 feet in compliance?
That's correct.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it'll be a maximum of 3 feet high, and it's 5 feet now. So there's 2 feet back.
2 feet.
So 2 feet going east, 2 feet going north, and it's lowering 3 feet, which is taking off 2 feet, obviously, from the 5 foot fence, but it's down to the legal 3 feet that staff said that is the legal height, not to say that this fence is legal at that point, but that's what the motion is on the floor. Okay? All right? Any further questions? Councillor Danch.
Are you satisfied with that, Rachel?
Yep, she's shaking her head yes.
Okay, that's fine, because we've wasted way too much time on a fence here. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? Please raise your hand. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay. Come back now, Councillor Baggy. Your banishment has ended. Taking my coffee? Okay, so we're on to item number 3, Engineering and Operations Department Engineering Division Report 2020-160, subject project number 2020-02, Elm Street Bulk Water Station Replacement. Mover is Councillor Bruno, seconder is Councillor Danch. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. In looking at this, I recall when other stations were refurbished. My initial concern was only that A while back, I had heard that the Humane Society may have wanted to purchase, take over that building, and we would now be doing a refurbished water station there, which could be accommodated if we did that with a lease or rental. But I didn't know, when I start off with one, at some point if Mr. Shapowski could speak to that, or anyone that knows that that may be in the future. My real question about this wasn't really an engineering question or the pricing. It would be through you to Mr. Bowles. We've done a lot of conversations about self-sustaining entities, and my only concern is that the capital cost of this project over the life expectancy of it, and that all costs are in, including upkeep, the capital cost, paving, grass cutting, electricity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Be looked at not for moving this forward tonight, but for the purpose of just ensuring council that both stations operate on a self-sustaining basis. And secondly, I'm not so sure, I don't know if this is, I think this is still a Mr. Bowles question, so I'm going to ask it. If it's not Mr. Bowles, perhaps you could refer me to who in staff could answer it. My concern is that non-tax-paying, non-resident people who get the benefit of our water system, is there, should there be, can there be a differential in pricing for non-resident? I'm not so sure how you would police that with the haulers, but I guess I really just want to see that fair is fair in terms of cost recovery. And if you have any thoughts on that, or is that something you could study, and if the rate needs to be augmented because of this capital expense, you could come back to us at a later time when we're setting rates. But this whole construction project just prompted the question of cost recovery.
Through the mayor to the councillor and council, I think it's a great point to bring up. I think, as many of you know, I think I'm hitting 5 months. This project, I think, originally predates me. I'd be happy to take it back, work with the Director of Public Works, take a look at the cost recovery and the business model, take a look at the user fees that could be applied here, and come back to council with the full report on it.
Okay, that doesn't preclude us from issuing this tender though, correct?
Yeah, to the mayor, no impact in issuing the tender should council wish to move forward. I think the business case for it, or the need, has been put forward previously. I think if there's any additional questions on the need, the Director of Public Works, Mr. Shapowski, is online and might be able to respond to that.
Mr. Shapowski, any comments?
Yeah, through you, your worship. Just a general overview. The current station's end of life was in 2014. It's currently located within a very small section of the animal shelter on the Elm Street site. So this project is actually to formalize, or not, will actually formalize a typical standalone bulk water station, which will sit closer to Stonebridge Road. The station has already been built, and it is to the same specifications as our Elizabeth Street station in order to standardize all of the equipment. So this report is essentially to approve the contractor to install the unit, as the budget has already been previously approved and the station's already built. Speaking as to revenue sources for it, we did come in with just over $100,000 in revenue after all of our expenses in 2019. So the stations do generate income. That's for both stations, but they do generate revenue for the city.
Okay, you're fine with that? Any further questions on this one? Councillor Bader?
So just so I'm clear, are we moving ahead with Councillor Bruno's ask?
That's more of a direction that we can talk about after, but we'll vote on the tender first. We can have staff bring those numbers back in a separate report, because really I gave him some leeway tonight. It didn't really have anything to do with this, but it did tie itself in, so that was fine. That's probably something that is a conversation staff should be having with us, so. Is that fine, Councillor? Yeah, all we're voting on is the moving ahead with this.
Right, because I think we did this exercise a number of years ago when we started to redo these water stations. And what it really is the charge for water to residents of Ward 4. And, I think they're paying for these upgrades in the price of that water. So just to be clear. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, please raise your hand. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor. Item number 4, Corporate Services Department Information Technology Division Report 2020-151. Subject, Microsoft Office 365 Cloud Migration. That's moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Clayliff. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions, and I think they probably, I don't know who they'll actually go to in this one. The first question that I have is, did the work for this migration go out to tender?
Madam Clerk?
I believe this answer can actually be from Mr. Bowles.
Okay, Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, what we did with this project is we went out to a number of potential advisors, implementers with respect to this project. We did a kind of an informal tender process. We treated it as a negotiated purchase. Within our policy, you can do a negotiated purchase when you require somebody to have specific knowledge in certain areas. We found ourselves in a unique spot with this transition, specifically recognizing a lot of people have already transitioned into the Microsoft Office out of this type of product, and we needed a unique skill set between the two. We did find one after a considerable amount of time. We've been on the project to find somebody to help us do this for about 2 months.
Councillor?
Thank you. The next question that I have probably to Mr. Bowles, through you, Your Worship, would be Quest in their proposal or in the report claims they can do the migration within 2 days, where we are saying that it would take our group 6 months, and I understand that it would take 6 months because we're occupied and maybe don't have the time to spend at it diligently. But if it can be done in 2 days, it would be. I would like to understand how our staff couldn't take 2 days of time to do it.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor, that's actually a really good question, and perhaps the way I wrote the report wasn't as clear. So what happens with Quest software is they actually have the ability to take our server and run it through their server to do the migration. So instead of us sitting here and letting, kind of like your home when you're trying to download a movie or you're trying to upload a movie, it's going to take a considerable amount of time. We can actually just take the drives to them and do it all through their process, where they're able to do it at a much faster speed than we ever could based on our connection speeds. So the data that we have that we'd be moving to the cloud is, and I apologize, I don't have that number right now, but it is significant. And that's the big driver with the speed that we pick up with them. Yeah.
Thank you. That answered the question.
Great, Councillor. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you, Council. Item 6, now for the conflict for Councillor Beauregard. Memorandum from Councillor Harry Wells regarding designating the vulnerable aquifer Schedule B of official plan as a source water for rural residents of Port Colborne. I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu seconding that. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, to members of the public listening. This is directed at a water source that is critical to our community as well as the communities of our neighbors. And it is vulnerable. It's been identified by the source agency, the NPCA, that it is a vulnerable aquifer. And our rural community and those of Wainfleet and Fort Erie depend upon the same aquifer, which is a common aquifer, a common water, to supply them their everyday needs for fresh, consumable water. Sometimes we take it for granted because we are so water rich in our area. We heard earlier tonight in regards to our problems with our drains and flooding and fresh water, so sometimes it's feast and famine. But we take it for granted sometimes, the fresh water, until it doesn't come out the tap. And when it doesn't come out the tap, we get a little excited. The same thing would happen is if it came out of the tap and it was contaminated, like it happened in Michigan with the lead contamination from the piping. When you look at it from a perspective of a global aspect, there's only less than 0.1% of all the water on Earth is fresh and easily accessible. It's hard to believe that where we are. But if you were sitting in the middle of a desert or sitting in the middle of Africa, you would understand that there are water shortages. And this water shortage is going to increase, and our water is going to become more and more valuable as the climate change proceeds. Because the fresh water is a byproduct of salt water and through an evaporation process and reprecipitation process. It's a finite volume of water that we're dealing with. It's not something that's always going to be there. And it takes a recharge rate on that, which is difficult to maintain if the groundwater is being affected. The other aspect on this is we've learned from the Walkerton experience that it can be something that we don't really recognize. It's not a threat that we can easily see, such as, let's say, for example, the mineral aggregate business, of which I have to say that the Waterford group out of Wainfleet, the Walker group out of Fort Erie, and even the Rankin group out of Port Colborne here are doing a good job at managing and not contaminating the groundwater. So it's potentials aside from that. For example, we have a project that's going on with the city to tunnel under the canal. Well, that tunnel is going to actually hit the aquifer. That tunnel will penetrate the aquifer. If there was a mishap in that tunneling exercise, it could contaminate the aquifer. So we need to ensure that what we're doing that could have an impact on that aquifer is protected. And the only way we can do that is bring attention to the fact that that aquifer is a common source of water for many parts of Ontario, which include Wainfleet, Welland, Fort Erie, and Port Colborne. There are upper tier governments, provincial policy statements, the Clean Water Act, all of those things are there to protect it, but they do so at a minimum requirement. And the expectation by those acts and the governing bodies of those acts is that local municipalities will take into account unique characteristics associated to their municipality and their water sources and provide more stringent protection of that. They will go above what is the minimal requirement, and that's an expectation by them. If you refer to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, their drinking water source protection plan actually states, we all need and deserve safe drinking water, and in this regard, it is everyone's interest to ensure that our drinking water is safe and secure. And what I'm asking for is for Port Colborne to take the lead to identify the aquifer as a source water so that it can be included in our official plan, in the region's official plan, as well as our bylaws, the proper way of protecting it. And with that, I would ask you to recognize the aquifer as identified in our official plan, Schedule B3, as a source water for rural residents of the city, and that the Director of Planning and Development be directed to amend the official plan to include the aquifer such that the aquifer receives the same consideration and protection from susceptible threats of contamination or adverse impacts that an intake protection zone such as IPZ1 and IPZ2 would, and that the region of Niagara, Township of Wainfleet, City of Welland, Town of Fort Erie, and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority be notified of the city's action and be requested to pursue similar updates to their municipal planning and other documents in order to protect the aquifer. Thank you.
Great, Councillor. I'm glad you did bring this forward. I do have one question for you, only because in reading the official plan and getting some information from staff today, under the IPZ1, which I believe is the canal, and IPZ2, which is the urban area that borders the canal to the east and the west, agricultural use is not allowed. So we got to make sure that we don't cut our farms off, because really, if you're looking at particularly Ward 4 with the wells, with those that use wells out there, you know, we don't want agricultural use in that. So you're gonna have to work with staff to make sure that for that area, you're gonna have to exclude the exclusion of agriculture.
Through you to Mayor, you wouldn't exclude it, but you would make sure that mitigation measures were in place in order to protect it. So, and that goes even with any industrial development in an IP zone. If it was such that they could put in measures to prevent that a contamination of the water source, then that would be done.
Oh, correct.
So that's.
I'm just saying there is wording that's going to have to be changed in our only because it just says agricultural use.
Absolutely, I agree,
yeah,
and I think that all needs to be readdressed, and
yes.
I think that's why the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority should look at that. Just to let you know that I did go on to the region's official plan work webinars last week. I raised the same questions, and I did not get any answers to the questions.
Okay.
And in correspondence with the region, I again asked the similar questions, and I have not had a response from them too, but I will be working with them in order to get this.
Good, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Baggett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like you, I didn't know what the IPZ-1 and IPZ-2 even meant, and what the provincial policy statement as it relates to the aquifer. I have no idea what the policy statement says. In reading this, I don't think this went through staff. You know, no disregard to Councillor Wells, but I'd be more comfortable this went through Mr. Aquilina for more clarification in this report. And like you said, like there are things here, like I'm very leery about approving this the way it's written until it goes through our staff.
Well, just to clarify, yeah. I think that's what the councillor wants. He'll have to work with staff really before any changes are made. So really what this is, it's directing staff to have the aquifer protected with, against susceptible threats, but based on our policies, bylaws, and official plan here, we've got to make sure that what's in those wordings based on the current standards of those two zones, the IPZ1 and 2, which really only considers the intake plant on the canal. So that's what it protects. This is an area that a municipality, whether it's the region or Port Colborne, we don't operate any of the wells out there. So we don't test them on an ongoing basis or that. They're all privately owned on each individual's property. So what the councillor is bringing forward is that the aquifer that feeds those wells needs some protection, and that we can add that within our policies, bylaws, and zoning so that we can help protect the aquifer. That's where he's going with this. So there is more work to be done, believe me. So I just want to make sure that's confirmed. Correct, Councillor? Okay, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor? I have Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bodnar, then Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Wells. Harry, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think that in this term of council, this is probably the single most important motion that we've been entertaining. It's right up there along with housing and issues that are totally affecting our community. Safe drinking water, it just stands above them all. So I do thank you for bringing this forward, and with enacting this, we will probably be able to help the region along with their efforts as well. So I think it'll be a positive thing for everybody around. I fully intend to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Wells. I had the occasion to watch a documentary, just came upon it just by accident on fresh water. And it was eye-opening, scary, and I think Harry hit it right on the nose. We're surrounded by water, never give it a thought. You want to see some areas that had water, don't have water anymore. A lot of this was in the U.S., some was in Canada, but it's real, and once it's messed up, it's pretty hard to get it back. Just one little technical point. When Councillor Wells, when you were reading this and you were going to send it off, you said the Township of Wainfleet, the City of Welland, the Town of Fort Erie. I just noticed that in this memorandum, it doesn't mention Welland here at all. So if you wanted to put that in, I just bring it to staff's attention that that it doesn't say it in there. Maybe it was just left out, but that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, and we'll confirm that. Welland, do you want included?
Yes, there was some short time frame changes to that, and so what I have read out is an amended form of the motion that I put forward to include both Welland and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority.
So I'll take that as a friendly amendment because you're the mover. And the seconder, Councillor Bagu, is that fine with you? Yeah, okay. So it'll be the region of Niagara, Township of Wainfleet, Town of Fort Erie, the City of Welland, and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. Good, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Any questions here? Sorry, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Wells. I never really thought much of the aspect of industry, or really the urban area that sits on top of the aquifer, because generally, you know, when we speak of wells and we speak of the rural area and that source water protection, it wasn't until you mentioned the word industry that I thought, well, whilst we have potable water and somebody's looking after that, these regulations, I never really thought then of the impact. So, I mean, if it's in town in the urban service area, but I don't know, there's a gas station or an abandoned gas station or an industry or dry cleaning or whatever could cause a pollutant to seep into the ground. So would this, by doing this, would it would still protect the aquifer and wells beneath the urban service area and areas that have potable water as a source to a contaminant?
That is correct. In fact, if you go back a little bit in time when Vale was Inco, they had a permit to take water in order to maintain the contamination on site. So they would be pumping out the groundwater at a rate which would stop the migration off-site. And they would put it through their treatment facility, treat it, and then discharge it into the lake. So there could be contamination on the urban side of that aquifer, depending on the penetration of it. And exactly. So that's why I'm suggesting we just look at the aquifer and just keep that front and center when we are doing development, that it's there
Let's make sure we don't damage it.
Great, thanks.
I mean, if you even look to our west to the township of Wainfley, the boil water advisories from wells because of septic services. It's as simple as that. So, big pipe doesn't look that bad after all out there. Well, hey, I mean, they're on boil water. I mean, that's been boil water for a number of years. I mean, it's exactly what the counselor's talking about. Exactly what he's talking about. So, any further questions for those online? Any further questions in here? All those in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you, Council. Councillor Beauregard can come back from purgatory. He's back. Okay. All right. We're on to proclamations. There are none this evening. There are no minutes of boards, commissions, or committees. Now we're going into consideration of bylaws. I have Councillors Beauregard and Councillor Desmarais to move that. Madam Clerk, the bylaws.
There are 3 bylaws this evening. 6827-77-20 to 6829-79-20.
Okay. Any questions on any of the bylaws, councillors? Those online? Those in the chamber? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. So that ends this portion of our meeting. We do have an in-camera session next. So for those watching at home, we will be cutting off and going to an in-camera Zoom. But this time I have a mover, Councillor Dance, seconder, Councillor Bruno. The council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Minutes of the closed session portion of July 15th, 2020, September 2nd, 2020, and September 17th, 2020. And B, Department of the Chief Administrative Officer, Project Management Office, presentation concerning the potential disposition of city-owned land pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsections 239, subsection 2C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Anyone have a conflict on this? Seeing none. All those in favor of going into in-camera, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Okay, that's it for the WeeStream. Thank you.